Yo, what's up? Welcome to Fanfic TV, where stories come alive. Buckle up because today we have. What if Harry befriended a goblin accountant at age 4 and discovered the Weasleys were paid monthly to be his friends? Quick favor, if you dig this content, drop a like and subscribe. It takes just a second but means so much to us. Let's roll! Chapter 1. The Boy Under the Stairs. The cupboard door slammed shut with a decisive click. 4-year-old Harry Potter huddled in the darkness, skinny arms wrapped around equally skinny legs. His glasses sat crooked on his nose, taped in 3 places but still better than nothing. Outside his cramped sanctuary, Uncle Vernon's heavy footsteps shook dust from the ceiling beams. 2 days! His uncle had bellowed before locking him in. 2 days without meals for that freakish nonsense! Harry hadn't meant to turn his teacher's wig blue. He didn't even know how it had happened. One moment Mrs. Carrick was scolding him for something Dudley had done, the next her perfectly coiffed brown hair had transformed into a shocking electric blue. The entire class had erupted in laughter, fingers pointing at Harry even though he'd been as surprised as everyone else. His stomach growled. The small boy pressed a palm against it, willing the hunger away. He'd grown accustomed to the gnawing emptiness, but that didn't make it hurt any less. A spider crawled across the sloped ceiling. Harry watched its meandering path, imagining it had a home somewhere in the darkest corner of the cupboard. Perhaps a family waiting. He envied the spider. Boy! Aunt Petunia's sharp voice penetrated the thin door. Your uncle and I are taking Dudley to the cinema. Mrs. Fig can't watch you, so you'll be coming along. But you'll wait in the car, and if there's even a hint of abnormality, it'll be a week in the cupboard. The lock rattled open. Harry squinted at the sudden light. Well? Get out then! And comb that ridiculous hair. 5 minutes later, Harry sat silently in the back seat of Uncle Vernon's company car, Dudley beside him taking up significantly more than half the available space. His cousin smelled of chocolate and entitlement. I want popcorn and ice cream, Dudley was saying as Vernon navigated the streets of Little Whinging toward London. Of course, Duddykins, cooed Petunia. Anything for our birthday boy. Harry stared out the window. It was Dudley's actual birthday next week, but the Dursleys had been celebrating Dudley's birthday season for what felt like eternity. Today was the 3rd special outing this week alone. The car pulled into a multi-story car park near Leicester Square. Uncle Vernon twisted in his seat, jowls quivering as he fixed Harry with a threatening glare. You stay in the car. Each word emerged like a separate sentence. We'll be 3 hours. If I find you've moved, I won't, Harry whispered, eyes downcast. Lock the doors, Vernon, Petunia fretted. What if someone steals the car with him in it? Uncle Vernon snorted. Who'd want him? The Dursleys departed, Dudley waddling between his parents, already demanding treats before they'd even reached the cinema. Harry watched them disappear into the crowd, then slumped against the window. 3 hours alone in a car was hardly the worst punishment he'd endured, and at least out here, the space felt larger than his cupboard. After 15 minutes of counting passing cars, Harry grew restless. The car was becoming stuffy despite the cool spring air outside. He tried the door handle. It was indeed locked. His attention drifted to the glove compartment, which Dudley had left ajar after rummaging for sweets. Inside, Harry spotted a small collection of pound coins that Uncle Vernon kept for parking meters. An idea formed. Dangerous, but tempting. Harry knew how to unlock the car from the inside. He'd watched Aunt Petunia do it countless times. With trembling fingers, he pressed the button, half expecting alarms to sound. Nothing happened except the subtle click of the mechanism releasing. His heart pounded so hard he felt dizzy. If the Dursleys caught him, but they'd be in the cinema for hours. He could explore just a little, maybe find a water fountain, and return well before they finished their film. Decision made, Harry slipped out of the car, carefully closing the door behind him. He memorized the parking level and space number, a habit born from years of being left to carry shopping bags while Dudley got to ride the mechanical horse outside the supermarket. The car park felt enormous as he made his way toward the exit signs. Every shadow seemed to hide Uncle Vernon, ready to pounce. But the farther he walked, the more his courage grew. By the time he reached the street, a strange excitement had replaced his fear. London spread before him like a living storybook. Double-decker buses rumbled past, street performers entertained clusters of tourists, and the air smelled of food from a dozen different countries. Harry had never felt so small, or so free. He clutched the 3-pound coins he'd borrowed from the glove compartment. Not stealing, he told himself, just borrowing. He would return them before Uncle Vernon noticed. Overwhelmed by options, Harry simply walked, allowing the flow of pedestrians to carry him along. He passed shop windows displaying toys Dudley would demand and break within days. His reflection stared back, a tiny boy with untamable hair, oversized clothes, and a hungry expression that had nothing to do with food. The crowd thinned as Harry wandered away from the main thoroughfares. Soon he found himself in a strangely quiet section of the city. The buildings here looked older, with an odd assortment of shops selling items he couldn't quite make sense of. A store window displayed what appeared to be actual cauldrons. Another showcased robes that reminded Harry of Halloween costumes. He paused before a particularly strange establishment. The sign read, "The Leaky Cauldron," though most passers-by seemed not to notice it at all. Their gazes slid from the bookshop on one side to the record store on the other, as though the pub between simply didn't exist. Harry's stomach growled again. Perhaps they sold inexpensive food. With his £3, he might afford a small snack. Gathering his courage, he pushed open the heavy wooden door. Inside, Harry froze. The patrons wore strange clothing, robes and pointed hats, some in vibrant colors that Uncle Vernon would have denounced as unnatural. A man at the corner table appeared to be stirring his tea without touching the spoon. Near the fireplace, 2 elderly women watched a newspaper with moving photographs. No one immediately noticed the small boy by the door. Harry considered retreating but found himself drawn to a particularly grumpy-looking short man, or was he a man at all, sitting alone at a table near the back, scowling at a stack of ledgers. His fingers were long and nimble, adorned with heavy rings. His ears came to distinct points, and a pair of tiny spectacles perched on his hooked nose. The creature looked up suddenly, fixing Harry with intelligent dark eyes. "Lost, are you?" he asked in a gravelly voice. Harry should have been frightened, but something about this strange being felt less threatening than Uncle Vernon on his best day. "I'm not sure," Harry admitted, approaching the table. "What is this place?" The creature's eyebrows, thick and wild, shot upward. "A Muggle-born, then? Or—" His gaze flicked to Harry's forehead, partially visible beneath his unruly fringe. The strange being's eyes widened. "Great galloping goblins," he muttered. "I'm Harry," the boy offered, extending a small hand as he'd been taught in school, though the Dursleys never bothered with such courtesies toward him. The goblin, for Harry now understood that's what he must be, stared at the outstretched hand with shocked disbelief. After a long moment, he accepted it with surprising gentleness. "Cragrock," he replied. "Senior Accounts Manager, Gringotts Bank?" He paused, studying Harry's face. "You haven't the slightest idea who you are, do you?" Harry frowned. "I'm Harry Potter." "Yes," Cragrock said slowly. "You certainly are." A serving witch approached, eyeing Harry curiously. "Can I get you something, sir?" she asked Cragrock, while continuing to stare at the child. "Privacy," Cragrock snapped. "And perhaps some food for the boy. He looks half-starved." Harry flushed, clutching his coins. "I only have £3. Cragrock waved a dismissive hand. "Muggle money. Useless here." When Harry's face fell, the goblin added grudgingly, "The food is on my account." The witch nodded and hurried away. Cragrock gestured to the chair opposite his. "Sit, Mr. Potter. It seems we have much to discuss." Harry climbed onto the chair, his feet dangling well above the floor. "How do you know my name?" Cragrock's laugh was more like a bark. "Everyone in the wizarding world knows your name, Mr. Potter." Wizarding world? Harry repeated, eyes wide behind his broken glasses. Merlin's beard. Cragrock muttered. They've told you nothing. The witch returned with a plate piled high with food, roast chicken, vegetables, and something that looked like pumpkin juice. Harry stared at it, then at Cragrock, uncertain if this was some kind of trick. Eat, the goblin instructed, closing his ledger. I find financial discussions proceed more efficiently on a full stomach. Harry needed no further encouragement. He ate carefully at first, mindful of his manners, but hunger soon overwhelmed propriety. Between mouthfuls, he asked questions, and Cragrock, with increasing incredulity, realized just how completely Harry had been kept from the truth of his heritage. You're a wizard, Mr. Potter, Cragrock explained as Harry devoured a treacle tart that had followed the main course. Born to James and Lily Potter, who were most certainly not killed in a car crash. Harry choked mid-bite. And not a car crash? No. Cragrock's expression darkened. They were murdered by a dark wizard called Voldemort. The same wizard who gave you that scar. He pointed one long finger at Harry's forehead. But why doesn't anyone tell me about this? Harry whispered, food forgotten? Cragrock's lips curled into what might have been a smile on a human face, but on the goblin looked predatory. An excellent question, Mr. Potter. One of many we should explore. And so began the strangest conversation of Harry's young life. Cragrock explained about magic, about Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry where Harry would one day study, about the night his parents died and how he, somehow, had defeated the greatest dark wizard of the age. The wizarding world calls you the boy who lived, Cragrock concluded. You're famous, Mr. Potter. Which makes the circumstances of our meeting all the more curious. Harry glanced at the clock mounted on the pub wall and gasped. He'd been talking with Cragrock for nearly 2 hours. I have to go back. My aunt and uncle, the muggles who starve you and dress you in rags? Cragrock's voice held dangerous undertones. Perhaps I should accompany you. No! Harry exclaimed. Please, they can't know I left the car. He stopped, unwilling to articulate exactly what Uncle Vernon might do. Cragrock studied him for a long moment. Very well, Mr. Potter. But our conversation has only just begun. I believe your guardians are financially compensated for your care, yet evidence suggests that compensation is being misappropriated. Harry didn't fully understand what the goblin meant, but the implication sparked a flicker of indignation. They're paid to take care of me? Indeed. From your own inheritance, no less. Cragrock shuffled his papers. The Potter vaults are among our oldest and most substantial. Yet here you sit, clearly neglected, wearing what appears to be clothing size for a young whale. Dudley's hand-me-downs. Harry mumbled. Unacceptable. Cragrock stated flatly. He extracted a small card from an inner pocket. This establishment connects to Diagon Alley, the wizarding shopping district of London. I cannot accompany you now, but perhaps we might arrange future meetings to discuss your financial affairs. Harry took the card hesitantly. But how? I'm hardly ever allowed out. Cragrock's eyes gleamed with something like mischief. Goblins have ways, Mr. Potter. If you're amenable, I could arrange for more convenient communications. Before Harry could respond, the pub doors swung open to admit a tall figure in sweeping purple robes. An imposing wizard with a long silver beard and half-moon spectacles paused, surveying the room. Several patrons called greetings. Cragrock's demeanor changed instantly. He gathered his ledgers with quick, efficient movements. Dumbledore, he hissed under his breath. Harry watched the elderly wizard, who seemed to radiate gentle power. Who is he? Albus Dumbledore. Headmaster of Hogwarts. Supreme Mugwump. And the wizard who placed you with those muggles. Cragrock's tone made clear his opinion of this decision. We must part ways now, Mr. Potter. Quickly. Bud the back exit. Now. Cragrock guided Harry toward a door at the rear of the pub. Keep my card hidden. I will contact you. Harry clutched the card tightly, following Cragrock through the door into a small courtyard. Will I see you again? he asked, suddenly desperate not to lose this connection to a world he never known existed. Cragrock's stern expression softened fractionally. Count on it, Mr. Potter. Goblins never abandon profitable ventures. He tapped a pattern on the brick wall, which began rearranging itself into an archway. Through it, Harry glimpsed a winding street filled with the strangest shops imaginable. Diagon Alley, Cragrock said. Remember it. One day you'll walk these streets as is your birthright. For now, however, he gestured back toward the pub. Through the front, back to your muggles. Quickly, before you're missed. Harry nodded, memorizing Cragrock's face. Thank you for the food. And for telling me the truth. Something flickered in the goblin's dark eyes. Truth is a precious commodity, Mr. Potter. One I suspect has been withheld from you at great cost. He checked a pocket watch. Go now. We'll speak again soon. Heart racing with equal parts excitement and fear, Harry slipped back through the pub. Dumbledore was engaged in animated conversation with the barkeeper, his back to the room. Harry kept his head down, pushed through the front door, and ran all the way back to the car park. He reached Uncle Vernon's car with 10 minutes to spare, breathless but exhilarated. The coins went back into the glove compartment. Cragrock's card he slipped into the secret space he discovered beneath the loose floorboard in his cupboard, where he kept his most precious treasures, a chipped toy soldier, a pretty blue marble, and now, proof that magic was real. The promised contact came 3 days later. Harry was weeding Aunt Petunia's garden, the summer sun beating down on his neck, when he noticed an unusual beetle watching him from atop a rosebush. It winked, actually winked, before transforming with a nearly silent pop into a rolled parchment. Harry glanced nervously toward the kitchen window. Aunt Petunia was engaged in her favorite activity, spying on the neighbors, and hadn't noticed. He quickly tucked the parchment into his oversized pocket. That night, by the dim light seeping through the vent in his cupboard door, Harry unrolled the message. Mr. Potter, Gringotts prides itself on client confidentiality and security. This communication is enchanted to appear as innocuous schoolwork to any eyes but yours. Our unexpected meeting has prompted me to review the Potter accounts, which fall under my jurisdiction. What I've found warrants immediate discussion. While I cannot divulge specifics through correspondence, I believe it prudent to establish regular contact. The enchanted beetle messenger will return weekly. You may send replies as needed. Regarding your current living situation, goblin magic differs from wizard magic. We might find ways to improve your circumstances without alerting your guardians or certain meddlesome wizards. Until our next meeting, Cragrock Senior Accounts Manager Potter Family vaults. Harry read the letter 3 times before carefully folding it and adding it to his treasures beneath the floorboard. He had a family vault. The realization brought tears to his eyes, not just the money, though that clearly bothered Cragrock, but the connection to his parents. Something of them had survived. And someone cared enough to check on him. The weekly beetle became Harry's lifeline. Through carefully worded letters and occasional clandestine meetings when the Dursleys believed him locked safely away, Cragrock began Harry's education in all things magical, with particular emphasis on financial literacy. The wizarding economy operates differently from the Muggle one, Cragrock explained during one such meeting in a secluded corner of the local park. Harry was supposed to be picking up litter while Dudley played with his friends, but Dudley had wandered off to torment smaller children, giving Harry precious minutes of freedom. Galleons, sickles, and nuts, Harry recited, counting on his fingers. 29 nuts to a sickle, 17 sickles to a galleon. Precisely. Cragrock nodded approvingly. And the current Muggle exchange rate? £5 to a galleon, approximately. Harry had memorized this fact with particular interest, understanding now why the Dursleys complained so bitterly about the cost of raising him. If they received what Cragrock called a standard wizarding stipend, it was far more than they spent on Harry's upkeep. Your financial acumen develops nicely, Cragrock said, the closest he came to praise. Now, regarding your accounts. Over the months that followed, Harry learned that he was, by wizarding standards, quite wealthy. The Potter family, while not among the Sacred 28, oldest wizarding families, had accumulated substantial assets through clever investments and magical innovations. Your grandfather, Fleamont Potter, quadrupled the family fortune with his invention of Sleekeasy's hair potion, Cragrock told him, eyeing Harry's perpetually untidy mop with something like amusement. Ironic, considering. But beyond financial matters, Cragrock provided something Harry had never experienced: acknowledgement. The goblin's gruff manner couldn't disguise the genuine interest he took in Harry's welfare. He brought nutrient potions disguised as ordinary sweets to counteract years of malnutrition. He arranged for a pair of proper glasses to be, accidentally, left where Harry would find them, enchanted to adjust to his prescription. Most importantly, Cragrock taught Harry about his heritage, not just the Potter legacy, but the history of the wizarding world itself, including its troubled relationship with Goblinkind. "We are considered lesser beings by many wizards," Cragrock explained during Harry's 6th summer, as they sat in the shade of an ancient oak tree at the far end of the park. "Allowed to manage their gold but denied wand rights and full participation in magical society." Harry, now 7 and considerably more articulate than the frightened 4-year-old who'd wandered into the leaky cauldron, frowned thoughtfully. "That's not fair. You're clearly just as magical as wizards." Cragrock's eyebrows rose. "A progressive viewpoint, Mr. Potter. One your father shared, incidentally." Harry's head snapped up. "He did?" James Potter was many things: reckless, privileged, occasionally arrogant, but never bigoted. Cragrock rarely offered personal opinions on Harry's parents, making this insight particularly valuable. "He once intervened when a fellow student attempted to hex a goblin representative visiting Hogwarts. Most unusual behavior for a pure-blood wizard of his standing." Harry treasured these glimpses of his parents, collecting them like precious stones. His mother's talent for charms. His father's skill on a broomstick. The way they'd defied Voldemort 3 times before their final encounter. Through these stories, Harry began constructing an identity beyond the boy in the cupboard. He was the son of brave, talented people. The heir to an ancient family. And perhaps most importantly, he had a future beyond Privet Drive. Cragrock seemed to sense this growing confidence. During the summer of Harry's 8th year, the goblin began supplementing financial lessons with more practical knowledge. "Your Hogwarts letter will arrive shortly after your 11th birthday," Cragrock explained. "Before then, you should understand the basics of magical theory, even without practical application." And so Harry learned, in theory, about transfiguration and charms, potions and magical creatures. Cragrock provided slim volumes disguised as ordinary schoolbooks, enchanted like his letters to appear as mathematics or literature to Muggle eyes. "The trace begins when you receive your wand," Cragrock told him. "The Ministry monitors underage magic, but cannot distinguish who performs it in a magical household. In your Muggle home, any magic would be immediately attributed to you." Harry nodded, understanding the warning. Even as his knowledge expanded, his circumstances at Privet Drive remained largely unchanged. The Dursleys still treated him with contempt, though perhaps with slightly less physical intimidation as he grew older. Dudley's gang still hunted. Harry hunting. When permitted, though Harry had grown remarkably adept at avoiding capture. His speed and uncanny ability to find hiding places sometimes bordered on magical, though Cragrock assured him this was likely just developing magical awareness rather than actual spellcasting. Accidental magic manifests differently in each young wizard, the goblin explained after Harry described finding himself suddenly on the school kitchen roof while escaping Dudley's gang. "Your inherent magic responds to emotional triggers: fear, anger, desperation. With proper training, you'll channel it through your wand instead." The most significant change came during Harry's 9th year, when Cragrock finally deemed it necessary to address the living conditions at Privet Drive directly. "Your guardians receive 75 galleons monthly for your care," Cragrock stated, spreading ledger sheets on the picnic table they'd commandeered in an out-of-the-way corner of the local library. "Approximately £375 at current exchange rates." Harry stared at the figures, mouth dry. "That's a lot." "Indeed." Cragrock's finger traced a column of numbers. Yet evidence suggests minimal expenditure on your behalf. Inadequate nutrition, clothing, living space, and medical care. Harry shifted uncomfortably. Having his circumstances laid out so clinically made them seem simultaneously worse and less personal, as if they were discussing someone else's misfortune. The payments originate from a special trust established for your maintenance. Cragrock continued. Not your primary inheritance, which remains sealed until you reach majority or begin your magical education. The trust is administered by your magical guardian. Who's that? Harry asked, though he suspected the answer from Cragrock's increasingly sour expression. Albus Dumbledore. Harry had learned enough about the wizarding world's political structure to understand the implications. Dumbledore wasn't just Hogwarts headmaster, but supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards and chief warlock of the Wizengamot, the Wizard High Court. He wielded enormous influence. Can we stop the payments? Harry asked hesitantly. Cragrock's smile showed too many teeth to be reassuring. Directly? No. Dumbledore's magical guardianship gives him legal authority. However, the goblin tapped his long fingers against the ledger. Goblins excel at finding loopholes in financial arrangements. The solution, when implemented, was elegantly simple. The maintenance payments continued, but Cragrock established what he called a reciprocal obligation clause that required evidence of proper care to unlock the full amount. In essence, Cragrock explained, your relatives must now provide receipts for expenditures on your behalf, clothing, food, educational supplies, to receive the full stipend. Without documentation, payments reduced to minimum subsistence levels. The effects manifested within weeks. Aunt Petunia, tight-lipped with fury after receiving notification of the new arrangement, grudgingly purchased Harry proper clothing. Not new, that would be too much to expect, but at least items from charity shops that actually fit. His meals, while still smaller than Dudley's portions, became adequate. Most significantly, the Dursleys cleared out Dudley's second bedroom, moving Harry from the cupboard under the stairs. Boy! Uncle Vernon had bellowed one evening, face purple with suppressed rage. Get your things. You're moving upstairs. Harry, who knew perfectly well why this sudden generosity had manifested but feigned ignorance, gathered his meager possessions and followed his uncle to the smallest bedroom. The space contained Dudley's broken and abandoned toys, but represented unimaginable luxury compared to the cupboard. Don't think this means anything. Uncle Vernon growled, mustache quivering. And don't you dare break anything. Harry nodded solemnly, fighting to contain his triumph. Later that night, the Beetle messenger delivered his weekly correspondence from Cragrock. Adequate accommodations established? The note inquired. Harry's reply was simple, beyond adequate. Thank you. The goblin's next message contained a rare sentiment, you're welcome, Mr. Potter. By his 10th birthday, Harry had established a life of parallel existences. To the Dursleys and the Muggle world, he remained the strange, quiet boy with the lightning scar, tolerated rather than loved, permitted rather than welcomed. But in the hidden moments and secret corners, he was the Potter heir, magical student in waiting, and perhaps most surprisingly, friend to a particularly grumpy goblin. Their relationship had evolved beyond financial advisor and client. Cragrock still maintained professional decorum, addressing Harry as Mr. Potter, and focusing their discussions on practical matters. But occasional glimpses of genuine affection appeared between ledger reviews and magical theory. When Harry successfully memorized the 12 uses of dragon's blood, Cragrock presented him with a small, jeweled pin in the shape of a lily. A traditional goblin gift for scholarly achievement. He explained gruffly, though Harry suspected the specific flower had been chosen with care. When Cragrock mentioned in passing that his 500th birthday approached, Harry spent weeks crafting a card with materials pilfered from school, incorporating goblin numerical symbols he'd learned from his studies. Most unexpected, Cragrock had said upon receiving it, voice suspiciously rough. The card disappeared into an inner pocket of his waistcoat, and neither mentioned it again, though Harry noticed the goblin wore a new waistcoat to their next meeting, one with a pocket precisely sized to hold the folded card. As Harry's 11th birthday approached, their discussions increasingly focused on practical preparations for his entry into the wizarding world. Your Hogwarts letter should arrive in late July, Cragrock explained during a June meeting. Typically delivered by owl, though given your guardian's attitude toward magic, they might employ alternative methods. What will happen then? Harry asked, both excited and apprehensive. You'll require school supplies, robes, books, cauldron, wand. Cragrock enumerated the items on his long fingers. A visit to Diagon Alley will be necessary. I can arrange an escort if needed. Harry nodded, imagining finally seeing the magical shopping district properly, not just glimpsed through a closing archway. And I'll have access to my vault then? Your trust vault, Cragrock corrected. The primary Potter vaults remain sealed until your majority at 17, though as the last Potter, you might petition for earlier access once you've established yourself in the wizarding world. Their conversation turned to Hogwarts itself, the four houses, the professors Harry might encounter, the subjects he would study. Cragrock, though never having attended the school, possessed extensive knowledge through his dealings with countless wizard generations. Traditionally, Potters attend Gryffindor House, the Goblin noted, though the Sorting Hat considers individual qualities rather than family history. What if I'm in Slytherin? Harry asked, recalling Cragrock's descriptions of house rivalries. The Goblin considered this. Ambition and cunning are valuable traits, Mr. Potter, particularly in financial matters. Goblins might all be Slytherins, were we permitted wands and sorting. His expression grew serious. However, given your history with Voldemort, such placement might present social complications. This led to discussions of wizarding politics, the prejudices that remained even after Voldemort's defeat, the families who had supported him, the complex relationships between magical species. Harry absorbed it all, understanding that his entry into this world would be complicated by his unwanted fame. The boy who lived, he repeated thoughtfully. They'll expect someone special. You are special, Mr. Potter, Cragrock said, in a rare moment of sentimentality. Though perhaps not in the ways they anticipate. As July dawned, their meetings became more frequent. Cragrock seemed almost anxious, reviewing information Harry had long since memorized, adding new details about wizarding etiquette and customs. The Weasleys, the Goblin said during their final meeting before Harry's birthday, are an old pure-blood family, though without substantial wealth. Their youngest son should be in your year at Hogwarts. Harry nodded, having heard of most prominent wizarding families by now. Blood traders, according to some, because they don't believe in pure-blood superiority. Correct. Cragrock shuffled through papers with unusual restlessness. They're closely associated with Dumbledore. Should you encounter them, exercise cautious friendliness. Something in the Goblin's tone caught Harry's attention. Is there something specific about the Weasleys I should know? Cragrock hesitated. Another unusual behavior. Merely standard caution, Mr. Potter. As we've discussed, your position in wizarding society makes you a valuable connection for many families. Harry frowned. Cragrock had taught him to recognize evasion in financial negotiations. You're not telling me everything. The Goblin sighed, a strangely human gesture. Some matters require proper documentation before discussion. I have suspicions regarding certain financial arrangements that may affect your future relationships. Until confirmed, speaking would be professionally irresponsible. Financial arrangements involving the Weasleys? Harry pressed. Mr. Potter. Cragrock's tone held warning. Trust that I continue to investigate matters pertinent to your interests. When concrete evidence emerges, you'll be the first informed. Harry reluctantly accepted this non-answer, though it left him unsettled. Their conversation turned to more immediate concerns: how Harry might reach Diagon Alley once his letter arrived, what to expect from his first visit to Gringotts Bank, which school supplies might be purchased second-hand to stretch his trust vault's contents. As they parted ways, Cragrock handed Harry a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. For your birthday, the Goblin explained awkwardly. Open it privately. Harry clutched the gift, unexpected emotion tightening his throat. Thank you? Cragrock nodded stiffly. Our communications may become less regular once you begin at Hogwarts. The castle's protections make beetle messengers impractical. However, the Goblin Postal Service remains available through Gringotts for a modest fee. All right, Harry promised. And during holidays, indeed. Cragrock hesitated, then extended his hand formally. Until September, Mr. Potter. Harry shook the offered hand, then, following an impulse he couldn't quite explain, stepped forward and briefly hugged the startled goblin. Until September. Cragrock stood frozen for a moment before awkwardly patting Harry's back. When they separated, the goblin's expression had softened imperceptibly. Mind your accounts, Mr. Potter, he said gruffly, their private farewell phrase. Always, Harry replied with a smile. Later that night, alone in his bedroom, Harry unwrapped Cragrock's gift. Inside the plain paper lay an exquisite silver pocket watch. Unlike Muggle watches, this one displayed not only time but moon phases, planetary alignments, and what appeared to be proximity warnings. The cover bore the Potter family crest, a design Harry had only seen in the books Cragrock had shown him. A small note accompanied the timepiece, from your father's vault. Rightfully yours. Use it well. Harry cradled the watch, tracing the engraved crest with his finger. For the first time in his memory, he held something that had belonged to his father. Something that connected him tangibly to his heritage. On the cusp of entering the wizarding world properly, Harry reflected on the extraordinary 4 years since a chance encounter with a grumpy goblin had changed everything. He had gone from a confused, mistreated child to someone with knowledge, resources, and at least one genuine ally. Whatever came next, Hogwarts, new friends, classes, he would face it prepared, not as the ignorant orphan Dumbledore seemingly intended, but as Harry Potter, heir to an ancient family, student of goblin wisdom, and a wizard in his own right. The beetle messenger tapped against his window one final time. Harry opened the parchment to find just 3 words in Cragrock's precise handwriting. Happy birthday, Harry. Not Mr. Potter. Just Harry. He smiled and carefully placed the note with his most treasured possessions, anticipating the arrival of his Hogwarts letter and the beginning of his next great adventure. Chapter 2. Ledgers don't lie. The Hogwarts Express gleamed scarlet against the platform's dreary backdrop, billowing steam that wreathed the bustling crowds and ghostly tendrils. Harry stood quietly beside his trolley, taking in the controlled chaos of platform 9 3/4. Families clustered in farewell gatherings, tearful mothers straightening robes, fathers delivering final words of wisdom, younger siblings pleading to come along. No one had come to see him off. Uncle Vernon had merely grunted acknowledgement when dropping Harry at King's Cross, clearly relieved to be rid of his burden for the school year. Remember our agreement, boy, he'd growled through the car window. No funny business during holidays. Harry had nodded, suppressing a smile. The agreement, that Harry would keep his freakishness, contained in exchange for basic civility, represented enormous progress in Dursley relations. Now, amid the platform's excited tumult, Harry felt strangely calm. Cragrock's years of preparation had transformed what might have been an overwhelming experience into a manageable transition. He knew what to expect from Hogwarts. He understood the significance of house sorting. Most importantly, he knew himself, not just as the boy who lived, but as Harry Potter, heir to an ancient family, with responsibilities and rights beyond what most first years could comprehend. His trunk contained not just the required school supplies but carefully selected extras, supplementary texts recommended by Cragrock, a journal enchanted for secure correspondence, and his father's pocket watch, now Harry's most treasured possession. His holly and phoenix feather wand rested in an inner pocket of his robes, not the most expensive, but new and properly fitted. Cragrock had been adamant about certain expenditures. Wands and books are investments, not expenses, the Goblin had declared during their trip to Diagon Alley. Robes can be second-hand if necessary, but never compromise on the tools of learning. A flash of vivid red hair caught Harry's attention. A family of redheads bustled through the barrier, led by a plump woman herding 4 boys and a young girl. Their well-worn clothing and mismatched luggage confirmed Harry's suspicion before he heard the mother's voice. Packed with muggles, of course. The Weasleys. Harry watched them with cautious interest, recalling Cragrock's strangely evasive warnings. The oldest boy had already moved off toward the prefect carriage. The twins, Fred and George, Harry gathered from their mother's exasperated calls, helped maneuver a third boy's trunk onto the train before disappearing after friends. The youngest boy, apparently starting Hogwarts this year, remained with his mother and sister. Harry deliberately turned away, focusing on navigating his own trolley toward the train. Cragrock's uncharacteristic reticence about this particular family warranted prudence. Better to observe first, approach later if appropriate. As he lifted his trunk onto the train, Harry heard a friendly voice behind him. "Want a hand with that?" One of the Weasley twins, impossible to tell which, stood there with an easy grin. "Thanks," Harry replied, accepting the offered help. Together, they maneuvered the trunk into an empty compartment. As Harry brushed his fringe back from his forehead, the twins' eyes widened. "Blimey," he breathed. "Are you?" "Harry Potter, yes." Harry extended his hand, using the polite but confident greeting Cragrock had coached him to employ with wizarding peers. "And you're a Weasley, though I'm afraid I don't know which one." The boy looked momentarily startled, then grinned again, shaking Harry's hand. "Fred Weasley. How'd you know our family?" Harry gave a carefully noncommittal shrug. "I've been learning about wizarding families. The red hair is rather distinctive." Before Fred could respond, his twin appeared in the compartment doorway. "Found a seat then, Fred? Who's this? Bloody hell, is that Harry Potter?" "George, language." Fred mimicked his mother's tone. "But yes, the boy who lived himself, and he already knew we were Weasleys." George's eyebrows rose. "Famous and clever. Dangerous combination." Harry found himself warming to the twins' easy humor despite his reservations. "Not famous by choice, I assure you." "Fred! George!" Their mother's voice carried through the open window. "Duty calls," Fred sighed. "See you at Hogwarts, Potter." After they departed, Harry settled by the window, watching the remaining Weasleys. The mother fussed over her youngest son, attempting to clean a smudge from his nose while the little girl clung to her hand. The boy looked mortified, about Ron's age, Harry guessed, recalling Cragrock's information about the family. The Goblin had been uncharacteristically thorough about them, listing names, ages, occupations, and known associations, though conspicuously avoiding whatever financial matter had made him uneasy. Harry's musings were interrupted when the compartment door slid open to reveal the very boy he'd been observing. "Mind if I sit here?" the redhead asked. "Everywhere else is full." Harry gestured to the empty seat opposite. "Help yourself." "Thanks." The boy settled awkwardly. "I'm Ron, by the way." "Ron Weasley." "Harry Potter." Ron's eyes widened predictably. "Are you really? Do you have the—" He gestured vaguely to his forehead. Harry lifted his fringe to display the lightning scar, an action he suspected would become tediously familiar. "Wicked," Ron breathed. "So that's where you know who." "Apparently," Harry replied mildly, reaching for the book he'd packed for the journey, A Concise History of Magical Transportation. The conversation felt oddly scripted, like Ron had prepared for this meeting, though Harry recognized that might simply be his own paranoia. Cragrock's cryptic warnings had left him unsettled. Ron seemed momentarily discomfited by Harry's lack of engagement, then rallied. "Is it true you were raised by muggles? What are they like?" Harry lowered his book. "Unpleasant in my case. Though I understand most muggles are perfectly fine people." "Dad loves muggles," Ron offered. "Works in the misuse of Muggle artifacts office at the Ministry. Drives Mum batty with all the things he brings home to tinker with." This matched what Cragrock had told him about Arthur Weasley's Ministry position and fascination with non-magical technology. Harry found himself relaxing slightly. Perhaps the Goblin's concerns were overblown. The journey progressed with intermittent conversation. Harry balanced between politeness and reserve, while Ron seemed determined to establish rapport, occasionally with forced enthusiasm that struck Harry as peculiar. When the trolley which arrived with sweets, Harry, despite Cragrock's admonitions about frivolous spending, purchased a selection to share, partly from genuine hunger and partly to observe Ron's reaction. "Go on, have a chocolate frog," Harry offered. Ron hesitated, ears reddening. "I've got sandwiches." "Trade you," Harry suggested. "I haven't had proper homemade food in ages." The simple gesture seemed to both please and perplex Ron, who surrendered his corned beef sandwich with visible relief. As Harry suspected, Mrs. Weasley made excellent sandwiches, despite Ron's complaints. Their compartment doors slid open again to reveal a bushy-haired girl already wearing her Hogwarts robes. "Has anyone seen a toad?" "A boy named Neville's lost one." "No toads here," Ron replied through a mouthful of chocolate frog. The girl's attention shifted to Harry. "Are you reading Magical Transportation Through the Ages? That's not on our first-year list." Harry smiled, appreciating her direct approach. "Supplementary reading. I find magical theory fascinating." "Oh, me too." The girl brightened. "I've memorized all our course books, of course, but I've been reading extras for background. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way." "And you are?" Introductions followed, with Hermione displaying the expected awe at Harry's identity before launching into a rapid discourse on houses, spells, and her hopes for the term. Harry found her enthusiasm refreshing compared to Ron's increasingly strained attempts at casual conversation. When Hermione departed to continue her toad hunt, Ron rolled his eyes. "Mental, that one. Whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not." Harry frowned slightly. She seemed perfectly nice. Just enthusiastic about learning. "Sounds like a Ravenclaw," Ron muttered. "My whole family's been in Gryffindor. Imagine if they put me somewhere else." "Houses aren't hereditary," Harry pointed out. "The Sorting Hat considers individual qualities." Ron gave him an odd look. "How do you know about the Sorting Hat?" Harry realized his mistake. A truly ignorant muggle-raised wizard wouldn't know such specifics. "I read Hogwarts, a history on the recommendation of the Goblin who showed me around Diagon Alley," he improvised. "A goblin?" Ron looked skeptical. "They usually just stick to Gringotts." "This one was particularly helpful," Harry said carefully. Before Ron could pursue this line of questioning, the compartment door opened yet again, revealing a pale, pointed-faced boy flanked by two larger boys with matching scowls. "They're saying Harry Potter's in this compartment," the pale boy announced. "Is it you?" "Yes," Harry replied evenly. "Malfoy," Ron muttered under his breath. The boy, Draco Malfoy, Harry presumed, gave Ron a contemptuous glance. "Red hair, freckles, and hand-me-down robes. You must be a Weasley." He turned back to Harry. "You'll soon learn some wizarding families are better than others, Potter. I can help you there." He extended his hand. Harry considered it thoughtfully, aware of both Cragrock's detailed briefing on the Malfoy family's Death Eater connections and the Goblin's repeated advice. "In financial matters, Mr. Potter, never reject potential allies prematurely. Even adversaries may offer valuable opportunities." Harry shook Malfoy's hand briefly. "I appreciate the offer, but I prefer to judge people individually rather than by family reputation." Malfoy's eyebrows rose, clearly caught off guard by the diplomatic response. "Sensible approach, I suppose. See you at the sorting, Potter." After the Slytherins-to-be departed, Ron stared at Harry. "You shook his hand?" "Malfoys are the worst sort of pure-blood fanatics." Harry shrugged. "Refusing would have made an enemy unnecessarily. Besides, he's 11, not a Death Eater himself." Ron looked unconvinced but let the matter drop as conversation turned to Quidditch. Harry displayed what he judged to be an appropriate level of ignorance, allowing Ron to enthusiastically explain his beloved Chudley Cannon's glory days and dismal present. The remaining journey passed pleasantly enough, though Harry couldn't shake a lingering uneasiness about Ron's occasionally stilted behavior. By the time they reached Hogsmeade Station, darkness had fallen. Following Hagrid's booming instructions, the first years gathered for the traditional boat journey across the lake. Harry found himself sharing with Ron, Hermione, and Neville Longbottom, the toadless boy whose name Cragrock had mentioned as another child of parents targeted by Voldemort. Hogwarts Castle appeared on the horizon, windows gleaming gold against the night sky. Even prepared as he was, Harry caught his breath at the sight. No description could capture the magic of that first glimpse, towers and turrets silhouetted against stars, reflected in the black mirror of the lake. "Magnificent," Hermione whispered beside him. Harry nodded, momentarily forgetting his reservations and strategic thinking. In that instant, he was simply an 11-year-old wizard coming home to a world of wonder. The boats glided into an underground harbor where they disembarked and followed Hagrid up stone steps to the castle's massive oak front doors. Professor McGonagall greeted them with stern efficiency, delivering a concise explanation of the four houses and their significance before leading them into the great hall for sorting. The enchanted ceiling displayed a perfect reflection of the night sky outside, candles floating beneath it like earthbound stars. Four long tables stretched the hall's length, filled with older students watching the newcomers with varying degrees of interest. At the front, the high table accommodated the staff, centered on an ornate chair where Albus Dumbledore presided. Harry studied the headmaster with careful neutrality. Cragrock had explained Dumbledore's complexities at length, his brilliance, his political power, his apparent benevolence concealing a chess master's calculating mind. "Trust his intentions if you must," the Goblin had advised, "but never his methods." The Sorting Hat sang its introductory song, explaining each house's qualities. When McGonagall began calling names alphabetically, Harry observed each sorting with interest, noting which students matched Cragrock's descriptions of important family heirs. "Granger, Hermione!" The bushy-haired girl practically ran to the stool, jamming the hat eagerly onto her head. After a moment's deliberation, "Gryffindor!" Ron groaned quietly beside Harry, who shot him a disapproving glance. The sorting continued through Longbottom, Neville, also Gryffindor, to his visible shock, and Malfoy, Draco, Slytherin, predictably. Finally, "Potter, Harry!" Whispers erupted throughout the hall as Harry walked calmly to the stool. He caught Dumbledore leaning forward slightly, expression unreadable behind his half-moon spectacles. The hat dropped over his eyes, and a small voice spoke in his ear. Difficult, very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh yes, and a thirst to prove yourself, but what's this? Unusual knowledge for one so young, and such interesting guidance you've received." Harry tensed. Would the hat report to Dumbledore about Cragrock? "Your secrets are safe with me, Mr. Potter," the hat assured him. "I see only to sort, not to reveal. Now, where to put you? You could do well in Slytherin, with that strategic mind." Not Slytherin, Harry thought firmly. Not because he shared the prejudice against the house, but because he knew it would complicate his position unnecessarily. "Not Slytherin? Are you sure? You could be great, you know, and Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness." "Greatness doesn't require a particular house badge," Harry responded mentally. "I'd prefer Gryffindor, if I have any say. Honoring your parents' legacy, I see. Very well, better be Gryffindor." The last word rang through the hall. The Gryffindor table erupted in cheers, the Weasley twins chanting, "We got Potter! We got Potter!" as Harry made his way to an empty seat near Neville. He deliberately chose not to sit directly beside the space clearly being saved for Ron, maintaining a friendly but measured distance. When Ron was inevitably sorted into Gryffindor as well, Harry applauded politely along with the others. The youngest Weasley boy took the seat across from Harry, looking relieved. "Brilliant! We're in the same house," Ron exclaimed with an enthusiasm that again struck Harry as slightly forced. Dumbledore rose for his welcoming speech, nonsense words that Harry suspected concealed deeper meaning, before the feast materialized on golden plates. As conversation flowed around him, Harry participated enough to seem engaged while observing his new housemates carefully. Hermione spoke rapidly about classes and the enchanted ceiling. Neville worried quietly about living up to his grandmother's expectations. The Weasley twins entertained nearby students with whispered plans for elaborate pranks. Percy Weasley, wearing his prefect badge like a medal of honor, lectured anyone who would listen about proper conduct. And Ron kept steering conversation back to Harry, asking questions that seemed designed to highlight his ignorance of the wizarding world, occasionally dropping information that felt oddly like pre-planned talking points. When Harry mentioned his visit to Gringotts, Ron quickly changed the subject to Quidditch. When the discussion turned to classes, Ron emphasized his family's financial limitations with an awkwardness that seemed calculated to evoke sympathy. It might be nothing, Harry reminded himself. Just a socially awkward boy eager to befriend a celebrity. But Cragrock's warnings echoed persistently. At the high table, Harry noticed a hook-nosed professor in black robes watching him with undisguised hostility. "Percy," he asked the prefect, "who's the teacher talking to Professor Quirrell?" "Professor Snape, head of Slytherin House. Teaches potions, though everyone knows he wants the defense against the dark arts job. Best not cross him, he can be rather nasty." Harry nodded, recalling Cragrock's assessment. "Severus Snape, former Death Eater, allegedly reformed. Dumbledore's unquestioning trust in him raises certain concerns. He and your father had significant conflicts during their school years." As the feast concluded and prefects led them to Gryffindor Tower, Harry found himself walking beside Hermione, who had apparently decided they shared intellectual interests. "I can't wait for Transfiguration," she was saying. "Professor McGonagall seems brilliant, though rather strict. Have you read beyond the first-year text?" "A bit," Harry admitted. "The theory is fascinating, though I'm sure practical application is more challenging." "Exactly. Understanding the fundamental principles of matter transformation is essential before attempting even basic transfigurations. I've been practicing the wand movements, of course, though without actual magic." Ron interrupted from behind them. "Mental, absolutely mental. It's the first day and you're already obsessing about classwork." Hermione stiffened. "Some of us take our education seriously. Some of us want to have fun too," Ron retorted. "Right, Harry?" Harry gave a noncommittal shrug. "I expect there's time for both." This diplomatic response satisfied neither of them. Harry suspected he'd just witnessed the beginning of a contentious relationship. Percy led them through the portrait of the fat lady into Gryffindor Common Room, a cozy space with squashy armchairs, tables for studying, and a crackling fireplace. After a brief orientation, the first years climbed spiral staircases to their dormitories. Harry found his trunk at the foot of a four-poster bed hung with deep red curtains. His dorm mates, Ron, Neville, Dean Thomas, and Seamus Finnegan, chatted as they unpacked, exchanging backgrounds and magical experiences. While the others discussed their first instances of accidental magic, Harry quietly arranged his few possessions, placing his father's watch on the nightstand and secreting Cragrock's journal beneath his mattress. Tomorrow, he'd write his first report to the Goblin about his arrival and sorting. As he prepared for bed, Harry caught Ron watching him with an expression that shifted too quickly from calculation to casualness. Perhaps lack of sleep was making him paranoid, but Harry couldn't shake the feeling that something about Ron's friendly overtures felt orchestrated. Sleep came slowly that night, despite the comfortable bed, a luxury compared to his accommodations at Privet Drive. Harry lay awake, listening to his dorm mates' breathing settle into the rhythms of slumber, thinking of Cragrock's final advice before they parted at King's Cross. "Remember, Mr. Potter," the Goblin had said, straightening Harry's jacket with uncharacteristic fussiness. "In the wizarding world as in the financial one, apparent value isn't always intrinsic value. Question everything, trust cautiously, and always check the fine print." Classes began the following morning. Harry navigated the castle's moving staircases and trick steps with the careful attention Cragrock had advised, maintaining a believable level of bewilderment, while secretly consulting the castle map the Goblin had provided. He partnered with different classmates in each subject, observing their strengths and weaknesses while displaying his own knowledge judiciously, enough to succeed but not enough to draw undue attention. Professor Flitwick, the tiny charms instructor, squeaked excitedly upon reaching Harry's name during roll call. Professor McGonagall, teaching transfiguration, impressed everyone by transforming her desk into a pig, then set them to turning matches into needles. Harry deliberately succeeded only partially, producing a silver match with a pointed end, while Hermione managed a perfect needle. Professor Snape, however, presented the first real challenge to Harry's carefully constructed facade. The potions master swept into the dungeon classroom with billowing robes and deadly quiet, delivering a mesmerizing speech about brewing glory and bottling fame before fixing Harry with a penetrating stare. "Potter! What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Harry hesitated. Cragrock had ensured he knew basic potion ingredients, but answering correctly might reveal his preparation. Still, antagonizing Snape seemed unwise. "A sleeping potion called the Draught of Living Death, sir," he answered cautiously. Snape's eyes narrowed. "Where would you look if I asked you to find a bezoar?" "The stomach of a goat, sir. It's an antidote to most poisons." "What is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane?" "They're the same plant, sir. Also called aconite." Snape's expression darkened. Well. It seems fame isn't everything. Someone's been preparing our little celebrity." Harry maintained neutral eye contact. "I just read the textbook, Professor." "Indeed?" Snape's tone suggested disbelief. "We shall see how far reading takes you in the practical application of this subtle science." Throughout that first week, Harry carefully balanced academic competence with social integration, making acquaintances across houses while maintaining appropriate distance. He wrote detailed accounts to Cragrock using the secure journal, encoding certain observations about staff and students according to the cipher they'd developed. Ron remained persistently at Harry's side, displaying almost proprietary behavior toward his friend. When Harry studied with Hermione, Ron complained. When Harry chatted with Neville about herbology, Ron interjected. When Justin Finch-Fletchley from Hufflepuff invited Harry to join a multi-house study group, Ron manufactured reasons why they couldn't attend. "Bit possessive, isn't he?" Hermione observed quietly as they worked together in the library, Ron having stormed off after Harry declined a chess match in favor of finishing an essay. Harry nodded thoughtfully. "I've noticed. Is it true you just met on the train? You'd think you were lifelong friends the way he acts." "We did just meet," Harry confirmed. "Though apparently our families had some connection before." He gestured vaguely to his scar. Hermione frowned. "That's rather odd, then. He acts almost like he's been assigned to be your friend." The comment struck too close to Cragrock's cryptic warnings. Harry changed the subject, but the observation lingered. Flying lessons provided another curious interaction. When Neville's accident left the class temporarily unsupervised, Malfoy seized the opportunity to taunt the Gryffindors, taking Neville's forgotten Remembrall. "Give it here, Malfoy," Harry said calmly. "I think I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to find." Malfoy replied with a nasty grin. "How about up a tree?" He mounted his broom and took off. Harry, weighing his options, followed suit despite Hermione's protests. Years of theoretical study couldn't prepare him for the exhilaration of actual flight. The broom responded to his slightest touch as he rose to face Malfoy. "No Crabbe and Goyle up here to save you," Harry observed, surprising himself with his own daring. Malfoy seemed to realize this. "Catch it if you can, then." He threw the Remembrall high into the air before diving back toward the ground. Harry tracked the small glass ball as it reached its apex and began to fall. Without conscious thought, he leaned forward and pointed his broom handle down, gathering speed in a steep dive that sent wind whistling past his ears. He stretched out his hand, the ground rushing toward him, and caught the Remembrall a foot from the grass, pulling his broom straight just in time to topple gently onto the lawn. "Harry Potter!" Professor McGonagall's voice cut through the cheering Gryffindors. Harry's heart sank as she marched him away from the class, ignoring his explanations, only to deliver the most unexpected outcome, a position as seeker on the Gryffindor Quidditch team. "Your father would have been proud," she told him with rare emotion. He was an excellent player himself. When Harry returned to Gryffindor Tower that evening, still processing this development, he found Ron waiting in the common room. "Well?" His red-headed shadow demanded. Did McGonagall expel you? No. Harry hesitated, then decided there was no point hiding what would soon be common knowledge. She's made me Seeker for Gryffindor. Ron's face underwent a fascinating transformation: shock, disbelief, calculation, and finally manufactured enthusiasm. That's brilliant, Harry. Youngest house player in a century, I bet. That's what McGonagall said. Harry agreed, watching Ron's reaction carefully. We'll win the cup for sure now, Ron declared, clapping Harry on the shoulder with forced camaraderie. Wait till I tell the family. They'll be over the moon. Especially with me being your best mate and all. The presumption struck Harry as odd, but before he could respond, the Weasley twins appeared. Well done, Harry, said George in an undertone. Wood just told us. We're on the team too, beaters, Fred explained. We haven't won the cup since Charlie left, but this year's team looks brilliant. George continued. You must be good, Harry. Wood was practically skipping when he told us. Harry smiled, finding their genuine enthusiasm refreshing after Ron's strange reaction. Thanks. I'm nervous about learning all the rules properly, though. We'll help, Fred assured him. First practice is tomorrow evening. After the twins departed, Ron seemed eager to reassert his position. I'll help too, Harry. I know loads about Quidditch strategy. Thanks, Ron. Harry gathered his books. I should write to someone about making the team. Your Muggle relatives won't understand, will they? Ron asked dismissively. No, but I have another correspondent who will, Harry replied vaguely, heading toward the dormitory. Ron followed. Who? You never mentioned anyone else. Just someone who's helped me understand the wizarding world, Harry said, uncomfortable with Ron's persistent questioning. But I've been helping you with that, Ron protested, his tone almost panicky. You don't need anyone else explaining things. The reaction seemed disproportionate. Harry changed tactics. It's just a thank you letter to the goblin who helped me at Gringotts. He was particularly kind. Ron relaxed visibly. Oh, that? Well, goblins aren't really the letter-writing sort. They only care about gold. Harry bit back a sharp response, remembering Cragrock's warnings about wizard prejudice toward magical beings. Nevertheless, I'd like to maintain good relations with my account manager. That evening, Harry wrote in his secure journal, detailing the flying incident and his unexpected Quidditch position. He described Ron's increasingly strange behavior and the contrast between the youngest Weasley brother and the twins. This serves my immediate goals by providing a legitimate reason for my relative popularity, reinforcing my father's legacy rather than my unwanted fame, and creating connections across house lines through sporting camaraderie, he concluded, employing their coded language for strategic advantages. Cragrock's reply arrived the following morning, delivered by regular owl post in an official-looking Gringotts envelope that drew little attention at breakfast. Mr. Potter, congratulations on your sporting appointment. Your father would indeed be proud, as he held the same position during his time at Hogwarts. Regarding your observations about certain red-headed individuals, I believe sufficient documentation now exists to warrant disclosure of my earlier concerns. I have arranged for an official account review meeting during your upcoming weekend. Professor McGonagall will receive formal notification from Gringotts today regarding your required presence for inheritance paperwork. This is standard procedure for orphaned heirs and should raise no suspicions. Saturday, 10 a.m., Gringotts Private Consultation Room 3. The enclosed port key, Goblin made, unregistered with the Ministry, will activate precisely at 9:55 a.m. Please ensure privacy before use. Respectfully, Cragrock's Senior Accounts Manager. Potter Family Vaults. The port key turned out to be a seemingly ordinary galleon with microscopic runes engraved around its edge. Harry kept it separate from his regular money, waiting with growing anticipation for Saturday. When Professor McGonagall confirmed the appointment during Friday's Transfiguration class, Ron immediately offered to accompany Harry. You shouldn't go alone, he insisted. Gringotts business can be tricky. The notification specifically states Mr. Potter alone. McGonagall informed him crisply. As his head of house, I've reviewed the request and found it entirely appropriate. But, Ron began. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Weasley, but I assure you, the goblins are perfectly capable of conducting standard inheritance procedures without additional wizards present. Her tone brooked no further argument. Saturday morning arrived with perfect autumn crispness. Harry dressed carefully in his best school robes, pocketed the portkey galleon, and quietly informed his dorm mates he'd be out for a meeting. Inheritance stuff, he explained vaguely. Probably just signatures on boring documents. Ron looked strangely anxious. Want me to wait for you in Hogsmeade? We could meet for lunch after. First years aren't allowed in Hogsmeade. Hermione reminded him from her armchair by the common room fire. Besides, Harry might be gone for hours. I'll be fine, Harry assured them. I'll see you all at dinner. He slipped away to an unused classroom on the third floor, checking carefully that he was alone before holding the galleon at precisely 9:55. The familiar hook behind the naval sensation of portkey travel whisked him away, depositing him somewhat ungracefully in a plushly appointed meeting room at Gringotts. Cragrock sat behind an imposing desk of polished obsidian, looking exactly as Harry remembered him, stern, meticulous, with just a hint of what might be fondness in his dark eyes. Mr. Potter, the goblin greeted him. Punctual as always. Cragrock. Harry smiled, dropping the formality they maintained in correspondence. It's good to see you. The goblin inclined his head. Likewise. Though I regret the circumstances necessitating this particular meeting. Harry settled into the chair opposite the desk. You've discovered something about the Weasleys? Indeed. Cragrock's expression darkened. Something that validates my earlier suspicions and raises troubling questions about your placement at Hogwarts. He opened an elegant leather folder, extracting several parchments covered in precise columns of figures. What I am about to share requires context. Following our first meeting 7 years ago, I initiated a comprehensive audit of all Potter accounts, standard procedure for valuable clients, but conducted with particular thoroughness given your unique situation. Harry nodded, recalling how Cragrock had gradually introduced him to his financial status, starting with basic concepts before revealing the full extent of his inheritance. The audit revealed several concerning patterns, Cragrock continued. Beyond the maintenance payments to your Muggle relatives, which we have since regulated, there existed a series of regular disbursements from your educational trust. These payments, authorized by Albus Dumbledore as your magical guardian, were initially categorized as advanced educational preparation. He pushed a ledger sheet toward Harry. Note the transaction dates and amounts. Harry studied the document. Monthly payments of 50 galleons, roughly £250, had been made consistently for nearly 10 years, starting shortly after his parents' deaths. The recipient was listed simply as Weasley M&A. Molly and Arthur Weasley? Harry asked, throat suddenly dry. Correct. Cragrock tapped a long finger against another document. The payments themselves, while questionable, might have legitimate educational purposes. However, the accompanying documentation revealed their true nature. He produced a contract bearing elaborate magical seals and signatures. This agreement, signed by Dumbledore and the elder Weasleys, establishes what can only be described as a friendship maintenance arrangement. Harry stared at the parchment, the elegant legal language swimming before his eyes. Phrases jumped out. Integration facilitation, social development support, compatible companion placement. And most damning, ensure primary social attachment to youngest son, Ronald Bilius Weasley. They were paid. Harry whispered. To make sure Ron became my friend? Precisely. Cragrock's voice held uncharacteristic gentleness. The contract specifies that their youngest son would be positioned as your primary peer relationship, with their other children providing supplementary social support. In exchange, the family receives monthly stipends plus a success bonus upon your satisfactory integration into their family unit. Nausea rose in Harry's throat. Define satisfactory integration. Cragrock's expression grew grimmer. According to Subclause 17b, This constitutes your spending significant holiday time at their residence, forming brother-like bonds with their children, and, most disturbingly, developing romantic interest in their daughter upon her Hogwarts entry. Their daughter? Harry repeated incredulously. She's 10 years old. The arrangement is long-term, Cragrock explained. Extended through your educational years with escalating payments as relationship milestones are achieved. Harry stood abruptly, pacing the room as anger and betrayal coursed through him. So everything, the platform meeting, Ron finding my compartment, his constant hovering, it was all orchestrated. Paid for? The evidence suggests so. Cragrock gestured to the documents. The contract includes reporting requirements. The Weasley parents must submit monthly progress assessments on your integration to receive continued funding. Harry stopped pacing, a new thought striking him. Do the children know? Does Ron know he's been hired to be my friend? Cragrock consulted another document. The contract suggests varying levels of awareness. The parents clearly understand the full arrangement. The older children appear to have been instructed to watch over you without explicit financial disclosure. As for Ronald, he hesitated, an unusual occurrence for the precise Goblin. A separate document authorizes a personal allowance for him, contingent on maintaining his position as your primary associate. Whether he understands this as payment for friendship or merely associates spending time with you with receiving pocket money is unclear. Harry sank back into his chair. And Dumbledore authorized all this? Using my own money? Yes. As your magical guardian, he has considerable discretion over your educational trust until you reach majority. However, Cragrock's eyes gleamed with something like satisfaction. His authority does not extend to contracts established without proper disclosure to interested parties, namely you. So the contract is invalid? Harry asked hopefully. Unfortunately, no. Magical guardianship grants him proxy consent. However, now that you're aware of its existence, you have certain rights to contest or renegotiate its terms. Cragrock smiled thinly. Particularly with Goblin representation. Harry stared at the damning paperwork. 7 years of preparation had given him considerable knowledge of wizard-goblin financial law. He understood the implications, and the limitations, of his position. What are my options? He asked finally. Cragrock nodded approvingly at the businesslike question. Several, each with distinct advantages and risks. He ticked them off on his long fingers. First, direct confrontation. We could formally challenge Dumbledore's authority to establish such an arrangement, potentially invalidating the contract entirely. However, this would alert him to your independent knowledge and resources, likely prompting increased monitoring and restriction. Second, renegotiation. As an affected party, you could demand amendments to the existing arrangement, perhaps redirecting funds to educational purposes while maintaining superficial compliance with the friendship parameters. Third, strategic acceptance. Continue as if unaware, gathering further information while establishing independent relationships beyond the Weasleys' influence. This preserves your position while we develop more comprehensive countermeasures. Harry considered these options carefully. What about the Weasleys themselves? Should I confront them? A complicated question. Cragrock steepled his fingers. The parents clearly entered this arrangement knowingly, though their motives may be mixed. Financial necessity combined with genuine concern for your welfare, perhaps. The elder children likely view their roles as protective rather than manipulative. As for Ronald and eventually the daughter, Ginny, Harry supplied, recalling the small red-headed girl on the platform. Yes. Their culpability depends on their awareness and willingness to participate in the deception. A selective confrontation might yield valuable insights while maintaining some potentially genuine relationships. Harry nodded slowly. I want to talk to Ron and maybe the twins. They're at Hogwarts now, so I can gauge their reactions directly. The parents and Dumbledore can wait until I have more information. A measured approach, Cragrock approved. I've taken the liberty of preparing documentation you might find useful. He pushed a folder across the desk. Certified copies of relevant contracts and transaction records, suitable for presentation if needed. Harry accepted the folder, suddenly overwhelmed by gratitude for this gruff, meticulous being who had become his most trusted advisor and, though neither would openly acknowledge it, something of a father figure. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For everything. Not just this, but all of it. The last 7 years. I'd be walking into all this completely blind if not for you." Cragrock looked distinctly uncomfortable with this emotional turn. "Merely fulfilling my professional obligations, Mr. Potter. The Potter accounts are valuable to Gringotts." Harry smiled, recognizing the deflection as the Goblin's characteristic response to sentiment. "Of course. Still, I appreciate your thoroughness." They spent the remaining hour reviewing Harry's other accounts and investments, discussing adjustments to his portfolio in light of current wizarding economic trends. The familiar financial discussions helped ground Harry, giving him time to process the shocking revelations about his supposed friends. As their meeting concluded, Cragrock handed Harry another enchanted galleon. "This will return you to Hogwarts. I've adjusted the destination to a secluded area near the lake rather than inside the castle. Fewer questions that way." Harry pocketed the portkey. "When should we meet again?" "I've arranged a follow-up appointment in 3 weeks, ostensibly for additional inheritance documentation. By then, you should have conducted your initial investigations." Cragrock hesitated, then added with uncharacteristic uncertainty, "If you require support before then, I'll use the journal." Harry assured him, "Don't worry. I won't do anything rash." The Goblin nodded, apparently satisfied. "One final matter. I've taken the liberty of establishing a small discretionary account accessible without Dumbledore's oversight. Technically a scholarship fund from an anonymous benefactor, but effectively your independent resources." Harry raised his eyebrows. "Is that legal?" "Entirely." Cragrock's smile showed too many teeth. "The benefactor exists, a corporation owned by a trust managed by a foundation established by the Potter family in 1743. Circular ownership structures are a Goblin's specialty." Despite his turmoil, Harry laughed. "Brilliant. Thank you." At precisely noon, the portkey activated, whisking Harry back to Hogwarts. He appeared behind a stand of trees near the lake's southern shore, the folder of damning evidence clutched tightly under his arm. The walk back to the castle gave Harry time to consider his approach. Direct confrontation might yield immediate satisfaction but potentially destroy any genuine elements within his fragile friendships. Strategic, selective disclosure would be more productive. He found Ron in the common room, playing wizard chess with Seamus while clearly keeping an eye on the portrait hole. The redhead jumped up when Harry entered. "Harry! How'd it go? Was it boring? Did they give you piles of gold?" The questions tumbled out with unconvincing casualness. "Interesting, actually," Harry replied evenly. "I learned quite a lot about my family finances. Ron, could we talk privately? There's something I'd like to discuss." Ron's ears reddened. "Yeah, sure. Chess later, Seamus." They climbed to their dormitory, fortunately empty on the pleasant weekend afternoon. Harry closed the door and cast a simple privacy charm Cragrock had taught him, not powerful, but sufficient to prevent casual eavesdropping. "Blimey, where'd you learn that?" Ron asked, eyes wide. "My Gringotts account manager showed me a few practical spells," Harry said, observing Ron's reaction carefully. "He's been very helpful, explaining wizarding customs, finances, relationships." Ron shifted uncomfortably. "Goblins don't know much about wizards, Harry. They're just interested in gold. On the contrary, they know a great deal about financial arrangements between wizards." Harry withdrew a single parchment from his folder, a statement showing the monthly payments to the Weasley family, with Ron's personal allowance highlighted. "Including this one." Ron's face strained of color as he recognized the document. "Where did you get that?" "From my account manager during my review today." Harry kept his voice steady despite the anger and hurt churning inside him. 50 galleons monthly to your parents, plus 5 directly to you when we became primary associates. That's the official terminology in the contract, by the way. Section 12, paragraph 3. Ron's mouth opened and closed without sound, freckles standing out starkly against his pale skin. "I'd like to hear your explanation," Harry continued quietly. "Because right now, it looks very much like you've been paid to be my friend." "It's not like that," Ron finally burst out. "It's not, Mom and Dad said. It was for your protection." "Protection?" Harry repeated skeptically. "Yeah. Dumbledore told them you needed proper wizarding influences, people to show you the right way of things. Said there were lots of families that would try to use you because you're famous, teach you dark stuff." Ron's words tumbled out desperately. "My parents agreed to help, make sure you had a proper wizarding family to belong to." "And the money?" Ron's ears flamed red. That's compensation." "For expenses and stuff. Having another kid around costs money, doesn't it? And we're not exactly rich. Expenses for a child who hasn't spent a single day at your home yet," Harry pointed out. "You've been receiving these payments for nearly 10 years, Ron." "That's not, I didn't." Ron stumbled over his words. "Look, I only found out about my allowance last summer. Dad said it was because I'd be helping you adjust at Hogwarts, looking out for you. Not like I was being paid to." He couldn't finish the sentence. Harry studied his supposed friend. Ron appeared genuinely distressed, but whether from being caught or from realizing the implications of the arrangement was unclear. "Let me understand," Harry said carefully. "Your parents told you to befriend me, watch over me, guide me toward proper wizarding values. In exchange, you get 5 galleons monthly spending money. And you don't see how that constitutes being paid for friendship?" Ron flushed darker. "When you put it like that, but it's not. I would have been your friend anyway. The money doesn't matter. Then you wouldn't mind if it stopped?" Ron faltered. "It's not about the money, Harry." "Really?" Harry sighed, anger giving way to a deep sadness. "The worst part is, I believe you might mean that. But it doesn't change the fact that our entire friendship was orchestrated, Ron. Planned and paid for by Dumbledore using my own trust fund." "Dumbledore said it was for your own good," Ron insisted weakly. "To keep you safe from bad influences. By controlling who I befriend? By paying your family to integrate me into some grand plan where I eventually consider you a brother and date your sister?" Harry's voice rose despite his efforts to remain calm. Ron blanched. "Date Ginny? What are you on about?" Harry pulled out another document. "Contract subclause 17b. Upon your sister's entry to Hogwarts, your parents are tasked with fostering appropriate romantic interest between us, with bonus payments for relationship milestones." "That's mental," Ron exclaimed. "Ginny's just a kid." "She won't always be," Harry replied grimly. "And apparently, someone thought it important enough to specify in a magically binding contract." Ron looked genuinely shocked. "I didn't know about that bit, I swear." That's wrong." The door burst open suddenly, revealing Fred and George Weasley. The privacy charm, designed for casual eavesdropping rather than determined intrusion, had apparently failed against their efforts. "Heard raised voices," Fred said without apology. "Thought we'd check what's got Ickle Ronnikins shouting," George added. "Especially with words like contract and payments floating about." Fred concluded, his usually cheerful expression uncharacteristically serious. Harry assessed the situation quickly. Perhaps having the twins present would provide additional perspective, and they seemed less likely to dissemble than Ron. "Perfect timing," he said, gesturing them inside. "I was just discussing with Ron how your family has been receiving monthly payments from my trust fund for the past decade." The twins exchanged glances. "What sort of payments?" George asked cautiously. Harry handed them the financial statement. 50 galleons monthly to your parents for what's officially termed integration facilitation services. In essence, ensuring I form close bonds with your family, particularly Ron, with an eye toward eventually dating Ginny." Fred whistled low. "That's unexpected." "You didn't know?" Harry asked, watching their reactions closely. "About payments?" "No," George said firmly. "About Mom and Dad wanting you to be part of the family?" Yes, Fred admitted. That was never a secret. Dad told us to look out for you at Hogwarts, George explained. Make sure you were adjusting all right, help if you needed it. But nothing about contracts or money, Fred added. And certainly nothing about you and Ginny. She's 9. 10, George corrected automatically. Whatever. Point is, that's bizarre. Harry felt marginally relieved. The twins' indignation seemed genuine. They clearly hadn't been knowingly participating in a paid friendship scheme. So you were just told to look out for me? Not specifically to befriend me or influence me? Well, Mum said you'd had a rough time with muggles and needed proper wizarding family, George acknowledged. But that's just Mum. She adopts every stray that crosses our path. Remember that summer she found that muggle boy lost in the village? Fred reminisced. Practically adopted him for a week until his parents were located. That's Mum, George nodded. Big heart, too many kids, not enough galleons. But actual payments. Fred returned to the main issue, frowning at the document. That's different. Ron, who had remained uncharacteristically silent during this exchange, finally spoke up. It's not like they're bad people, Harry. Mum and Dad, I mean. They wouldn't do something properly wrong. Perhaps not intentionally, Harry conceded. But accepting payment to influence someone's friendships and romantic interests crosses some significant ethical boundaries. The twins were examining the financial documents with increasing concern. This is Dumbledore's signature, George noted, pointing to an authorization. And it's from your vault, Fred added. Not school funds or ministry support. Exactly. Harry took back the papers. This isn't about your family needing financial help, which I could understand. It's about using my own money to control my relationships without my knowledge or consent. The three Weasleys exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, Fred spoke. Right. Well, this is properly messed up. Absolutely barmy, George agreed. What do you want us to do about it? Harry appreciated their directness. I'm still deciding my next steps. For now, I'd like to know where each of you stands. If our friendships, or potential friendships, are based solely on this arrangement, I'd rather know now. We barely know you, mate, Fred said bluntly. Seems a decent enough bloke, Quidditch skills aside, but we've hardly had deep, meaningful conversations. No offense, George added. None taken, Harry assured them, finding their honesty refreshing. So you're not invested in this integration business? Look, George said seriously. We'll help you if you need it because that's what decent people do. Not because Mum said to or because someone's paying our parents. Although, Fred mused, if you're looking to redirect those funds to more worthy recipients who wouldn't try to set you up with their prepubescent sister. Fred! Ron exclaimed, horrified. Joking. Fred insisted, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely joking. Harry turned to Ron, who seemed to be struggling with conflicting loyalties. And you, Ron? Where do we go from here? Ron stared at his shoes. I really thought we were friends, Harry. Maybe it started because of what my parents said, but I like hanging out with you. It's not about the money. Prove it, Harry challenged quietly. Tell your parents you know about the arrangement, and you want your portion stopped. Ron's head snapped up. But if it's not about the money, that shouldn't be a problem, Harry pointed out. You can still be my friend, if that's what you genuinely want, without being paid for it. The twins watched this exchange with uncharacteristic solemnity. He's got you there, Ron, George said. Ron's expression cycled through several emotions: indignation, embarrassment, calculation, and finally, resignation. Fine. I'll write to them tonight. Tell them I know everything and I don't want the allowance anymore. We'll make sure he does, Fred assured Harry. And we'll be having our own words with the parents, George added grimly. This isn't right, no matter how they justified it. Harry nodded, feeling emotionally exhausted but somewhat relieved. Thank you. I appreciate your honesty. As the Weasleys departed, the twins practically dragging a still protesting Ron. Harry sat heavily on his bed, the folder of revelations beside him. The confrontation had gone better than he'd feared but confirmed his worst suspicions. His friendship with Ron had been manufactured from the beginning, orchestrated by Dumbledore for reasons Harry could only speculate about. The implications extended far beyond hurt feelings. If Dumbledore had arranged this, what other aspects of Harry's life had been manipulated? His placement with the Dursleys, his introduction to the wizarding world, perhaps even his house placement at Hogwarts. All might be pieces in some grand design. Harry opened the secure journal and began recording the day's events for Cragrock. As he wrote, a sense of cold determination replaced his initial shock and anger. He had spent 7 years learning from the Goblin how to manage his finances and heritage. Now he would apply those lessons to something far more valuable than gold: his independence and the authenticity of his relationships. The wizarding world had welcomed Harry Potter as their savior and celebrity. They were about to meet Harry Potter, the strategist, trained by goblins to recognize value, identify deception, and above all, to check the fine print on every contract life presented. Dumbledore and the elder Weasleys would soon discover that the boy they sought to manipulate had resources and knowledge they never anticipated. The boy who lived was taking control of his own story. Chapter 3: True Value. The great hall hummed with morning conversation as Harry picked at his breakfast, mind still processing yesterday's revelations. Across the table, Ron pushed eggs around his plate, avoiding Harry's gaze. The twins flanked Harry like unusually solemn bookends, their typical mischief temporarily subdued. "You look terrible," Hermione observed, sliding onto the bench beside Harry. "All of you, actually. Did something happen?" Harry exchanged glances with the Weasleys. "Just sorting through some complicated friendship issues. We discovered our family's been keeping secrets," Fred said carefully. "Big paid for secrets," George added meaningfully. Hermione's brow furrowed. "That sounds cryptic," Harry sighed, considering how much to share. Hermione had shown herself to be intelligent, forthright, and unconnected to Dumbledore's manipulations. Perhaps another perspective would be valuable. "I'll explain later," he promised quietly. "Somewhere private." Before she could respond, the morning mail arrived, hundreds of owls swooping through the high windows, delivering packages and letters. A handsome tawny owl landed before Ron, extending a scarlet envelope with ominous formality. "Bloody hell," Ron whispered, face draining of color. "Already? Is that—" Harry began. "A howler," George confirmed grimly. "You wrote to them last night?" Fred asked Ron. Ron nodded miserably. "Used one of the school owls. Didn't think they'd respond so fast. Better open it," George advised as the envelope began smoking ominously. "They're worse if you wait." With trembling fingers, Ron broke the seal. The envelope immediately transformed into a mouth-like shape, and Molly Weasley's magically amplified voice filled the great hall. "Ronald Bilious Weasley! How dare you question family decisions made for Harry's own good? Albus Dumbledore himself arranged everything to protect that boy from terrible influences. The financial support was compensation for taking responsibility for an orphan child. Your father and I are coming to Hogwarts today to speak with you and Harry personally. Such discussions should happen face to face, not through accusatory letters." The envelope burst into flames, leaving stunned silence in its wake. Every eye in the hall had turned toward their section of the Gryffindor table. "Well," Harry said dryly, "that was subtle." The twins wore matching horrified expressions. "Did she just broadcast your private business to the entire school?" Ron looked like he might be sick. "I'm sorry, Harry. I didn't think she'd send a howler." Whispers rippled through the hall. Harry could feel curious stares from all directions. At the head table, Dumbledore was engaged in intense conversation with Professor McGonagall, both looking toward the Gryffindor table with concern. Hermione leaned forward. What financial support was she talking about? "The monthly payments from my trust fund to the Weasley family," Harry replied, loud enough for nearby students to hear. If privacy was no longer an option, perhaps transparency could be a weapon. Apparently, Dumbledore arranged for them to be paid to ensure I had the right sort of wizarding friends. Gasps and murmurs followed this statement. Ron sank lower in his seat as Hermione's eyes widened in understanding. That's why. Oh, Harry, I'm so sorry. That's terrible. It's complicated, Harry admitted. I'm still figuring out who knew what and why. Further discussion was interrupted by Professor McGonagall, who had made her way down from the head table. Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, the headmaster would like to see you both immediately. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley are expected shortly. Harry nodded, having anticipated this development. Professor, would it be possible for Cragrock, my Gringotts account manager, to join us? As this concerns my finances, I'd appreciate his expertise. McGonagall looked surprised by the request. I'm not sure that's necessary for what is essentially a family discussion, Mr. Potter. With respect, Professor, Harry said firmly. My account manager has been overseeing these particular transactions for years. His knowledge would be invaluable. The Transfiguration Professor studied him with newfound consideration. I shall convey your request to the headmaster. Please proceed to his office. The password is Chocolate Frog. As she walked away, Fred leaned toward Harry. Nicely played, bringing in Goblin reinforcements. I learned from the best, Harry replied, patting his pocket where Cragrock's secure journal rested. He'd send an urgent message as soon as possible. The walk to Dumbledore's office felt like a march to execution, with Ron trailing silently behind Harry. Neither spoke until they reached the stone gargoyle guarding the entrance. I really am sorry, Ron finally said, staring at his shoes. I didn't know about most of it, I swear. Harry studied his erstwhile friend. I believe you didn't know everything. But you knew something wasn't quite right, didn't you? Ron's shoulders slumped. Maybe. Sort of. Mum and Dad always talked about you, even before Hogwarts. How you need friends, how our family could help you. I thought it was just because you were famous and had no parents. And the money? I only found out about my allowance this summer. Ron insisted. Dad said it was compensation for taking on extra responsibility, looking after you. Not buying friendship. His ears reddened. Sounds worse now, saying it out loud. Harry sighed. Let's get through this meeting, then we can figure out where we stand. Chocolate Frog, he told the gargoyle, which sprang aside to reveal a spiraling staircase. They rode it silently to the top, where an ornate door stood slightly ajar. Dumbledore's office was a circular room filled with silver instruments emitting soft whirring noises and puffs of smoke. Portraits of previous headmasters lined the walls, pretending to sleep but clearly listening. Fawkes the Phoenix perched regally beside the enormous claw-footed desk where Dumbledore sat, fingers steepled before him. "Ah, Harry, Ron," the headmaster greeted them, blue eyes twinkling though his expression remained grave. "Please sit down. Lemon drop?" Harry declined the offered sweet, taking the chair directly across from Dumbledore, while Ron sat awkwardly to his right. "I've requested my account manager's presence for this discussion, sir. Professor McGonagall is conveying my request." Something flickered briefly across Dumbledore's serene expression, surprise, perhaps, or concern, before his benevolent smile returned. "Most unusual, Harry, though certainly possible if you feel it necessary. However, I had hoped we might speak privately first, as matters of friendship can be so delicate." "This isn't just about friendship, Professor," Harry replied evenly. "It's about financial arrangements made with my inheritance without my knowledge or consent." Dumbledore sighed deeply. "I see Gringotts has been more forthcoming with account details than is customary for minors. While I understand your concern, I assure you every decision was made with your best interests at heart." "My interests?" Harry repeated carefully. "Or your interests, sir?" The office door opened before Dumbledore could respond. Professor McGonagall entered, followed by two red-headed adults Harry recognized from the platform, Arthur and Molly Weasley. Behind them, to Harry's immense relief, came the unmistakable figure of Cragrock, impeccably dressed in a formal goblin business suit, carrying a leather portfolio. Minerva informs me Mr. Potter requested his account manager's presence, Dumbledore said mildly. Most unusual, but we shall accommodate. Gringotts prioritizes client requests. Cragrock replied with professional detachment, though Harry caught the goblin's quick assessing glance in his direction, particularly regarding matters of significant financial impropriety. Mrs. Weasley gasped. There's been no impropriety. Albus arranged everything properly. Molly, please, her husband murmured, placing a restraining hand on her arm. Let's discuss this calmly. Cragrock took the chair to Harry's left, creating a unified front opposite Dumbledore. The Weasley parents settled into conjured chairs beside Ron, who seemed to be trying to disappear into his seat. Perhaps we should begin with clarifying the situation, Dumbledore suggested genially. There appears to be some misunderstanding regarding the support arrangement for Harry's integration into Wizarding Society. I believe the situation is quite clear, Headmaster. Cragrock countered, opening his portfolio to extract several documents. For the past decade, you have authorized monthly payments of 50 galleons from Mr. Potter's educational trust to the Weasley family, with an additional 5 galleons directly to Ronald Weasley since September 1st. These payments were made pursuant to a contract establishing what can only be described as purchase friendship services. He placed certified copies of the documents on Dumbledore's desk, where they lay like physical manifestations of betrayal. That's a cold, calculating way to describe a perfectly reasonable arrangement, Mrs. Weasley protested. We've provided Harry with a wizarding family connection he desperately needs. By accepting payment from my own vault to do so? Harry asked quietly. Without telling me? Mrs. Weasley had the grace to look slightly abashed, though her chin remained stubbornly raised. You were a child, still are a child. Children don't need to understand adult arrangements made for their benefit. Perhaps I should explain. Dumbledore interjected smoothly. Harry, after your parents' tragic deaths, I made many difficult decisions regarding your future. Placing you with your Muggle relatives ensured your physical safety through your mother's blood protection, but I recognize you would eventually need proper introduction to Wizarding Society. So you paid the Weasleys to befriend me, Harry stated flatly. I arranged for a stipend to compensate a worthy family for taking on additional responsibility. Dumbledore corrected gently. The Weasleys have extensive experience raising magical children in a wholesome environment, aligned with the values your parents would have wanted you to embrace. And this required a legally binding contract specifying exactly how they should integrate me into their family? Harry pulled out the damning document. Including clauses about ensuring Ron becomes my primary associate and eventually orchestrating a romantic relationship with their daughter? Mr. Weasley paled visibly. The romantic component was never our idea, Harry. That was an addition suggested later. By whom? Harry demanded. All eyes turned to Dumbledore, who sighed heavily. The contract evolved over time to address various contingencies. Long-term stability for you seemed best served by establishing permanent family connections. You decided when I was a baby who I should eventually marry? Harry's voice rose despite his efforts to remain calm. Using my own money to arrange it? It was merely a suggestion, not a requirement, Dumbledore explained patiently. Ginny is a lovely young witch from an excellent family. Natural affinity might well develop without encouragement. Except you didn't leave it to natural affinity, did you? Harry gestured to the contract. You specified active encouragement of romantic interest with bonus payments for relationship milestones. That's not suggestion, that's manipulation. Mrs. Weasley looked increasingly uncomfortable. Albus, you assured us that clause was simply acknowledging what might happen naturally. You never mentioned bonus payments. A minor administrative detail, Molly, Dumbledore said soothingly. Merely ensuring proper documentation of the arrangement. Cragrock made a sound suspiciously like a snort. Proper documentation indeed. Let us be absolutely clear, Headmaster. You established a contract using Mr. Potter's trust fund to essentially purchase him a pre-selected family and future spouse, without disclosure to any of the affected parties except the adult Weasleys, who received financial benefit for their participation. We didn't, Mrs. Weasley sputtered. Did you or did you not accept monthly payments for ensuring your son befriended Harry? Cragrock asked with goblin directness. Well, yes, and did you understand that these payments came from Mr. Potter's own inheritance, not a school or ministry fund? Albus explained it was from a trust specifically for Harry's care. Mr. Weasley admitted, looking increasingly distressed. Then the facts are not in dispute, Cragrock concluded. Only the ethical interpretation of those facts remains questionable. An uncomfortable silence fell. Ron stared fixedly at his hands, face flaming red. Professor McGonagall, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, looked thoroughly scandalized. Albus, she finally said, I must say, I find this entire arrangement deeply troubling. Potter is not a commodity to be traded or a social experiment to be conducted. Thank you, Professor, Harry said gratefully, before turning back to the Weasleys. What I need to understand is whether any part of your family's interest in me was genuine, or if it was all about the contract and payments. Mrs. Weasley's expression softened. Oh, Harry dear. Of course it was genuine. We would have welcomed you regardless of any arrangement. Then why accept payment at all? Harry asked. Why not simply invite me to visit, get to know me naturally? We're not a wealthy family, Harry, Mr. Weasley explained quietly. When Dumbledore approached us about taking on responsibility for introducing you to Wizarding Society, the financial support made it possible for us to do so properly. New clothes for visiting, extra food for holidays, perhaps educational opportunities we couldn't otherwise provide. And you needed this support for 10 years before I ever set foot in your home? Harry pressed. The Weasleys exchanged uncomfortable glances. There were preparations, Mrs. Weasley said vaguely. Such as? Harry prompted. Regular updates from Arabella Figg about your well-being, Dumbledore interjected. Special training for the Weasley children in matters that might interest you. Research into your parents' lives to help you connect with their memory. Harry turned to Ron. Did you receive any of this special training? Ron nodded miserably. Mum made me read books about Quidditch history because your dad played. And I had to practice chess because apparently your dad was good at it. So your chess obsession was part of the preparation? Harry felt another small betrayal. No! I always loved chess, Ron protested. That part was real. It just worked out that it might help us connect. Harry turned back to Dumbledore. Why go to such elaborate lengths? Why not simply introduce me to several wizarding families and let natural friendships develop? The wizarding world contains many influences that could have led you astray, Dumbledore explained gravely. Without guidance, you might have formed attachments to families with darker allegiances. Like the Malfoys, Harry surmised. Among others, Dumbledore acknowledged. Your fame makes you a valuable connection, Harry. Not all would have your best interests at heart. And you determined my best interests included being manipulated into specific friendships and eventually marriage? I sought to create opportunities for positive relationships, Dumbledore corrected gently. The contract simply formalized the arrangement to protect all parties. All parties except Harry, Cragrock observed dryly. Whose consent was neither sought nor considered necessary, despite the fact that the funds came from his inheritance. Dumbledore's expression hardened slightly. As Mr. Potter's magical guardian, I am legally empowered to make such decisions until he reaches majority. A fact I do not dispute, Cragrock countered smoothly. However, now that Mr. Potter is aware of these arrangements, certain provisions of wizarding inheritance law come into play. Specifically, Clause 427B of the 1786 Magical Orphans Protection Act, which states that once an heir becomes aware of financial arrangements made on their behalf, they may petition for review and potential modification. Harry glanced at Cragrock with newfound appreciation. The Goblin had clearly prepared thoroughly for this confrontation. A technicality that hardly seems necessary among friends. Dumbledore replied, his smile returning. I'm certain we can resolve any concerns amicably, without resorting to legal maneuvering. I'd prefer clarity to amicability, Harry stated firmly. I want to know exactly what arrangements have been made with my inheritance, and I want the authority to approve or reject them moving forward. Mrs. Weasley looked hurt. Harry, dear, surely you don't think we've been taking advantage of you? Harry considered her question carefully. I think you accepted an arrangement that fundamentally deceived me, Mrs. Weasley. Whether you did so with good intentions doesn't change the fact that my trust was violated. Well said, Mr. Potter. Cragrock approved, extracting another document from his portfolio. I have taken the liberty of drafting a provisional agreement that would address these concerns while maintaining certain support structures, if desired. He handed copies to everyone present. Harry scanned his quickly, noting that it terminated the friendship maintenance contract entirely while establishing a scholarship fund for all Weasley children currently attending Hogwarts, with no strings attached regarding their relationship with Harry. This is very generous, Mr. Weasley said, looking surprised as he reviewed the document. It's not generosity, it's fairness, Harry corrected. Your family has limited financial resources, and Hogwarts education is expensive. I'm happy to help with that, provided it's my choice, openly made, with no expectation of manufactured friendship or future marriage in return. Dumbledore studied the document with a slight frown. This arrangement removes my oversight of these particular funds. Yes, Cragrock confirmed without apology. It establishes a separate educational trust with Mr. Potter as the primary signatory, though with appropriate adult countersignatures until he reaches majority. I'm only 11, Harry acknowledged. I still need guidance. But I want that guidance to be transparent, and I want final say over how my inheritance is used, particularly when it involves personal relationships. A reasonable request, Professor McGonagall interjected, giving Dumbledore a pointed look. I would be willing to serve as the required adult countersignatory, if that would provide appropriate oversight while respecting Mr. Potter's wishes. Harry smiled gratefully at his head of house. Thank you, Professor. That would be perfect. Dumbledore's eyes had lost their characteristic twinkle. I fear you may not fully understand the complexities of your situation, Harry. There are factors beyond financial considerations that influence these arrangements. Then explain them to me, Harry challenged. Treat me as someone capable of understanding, not a chess piece to be moved according to some grand strategy I'm not allowed to know. A heavy silence followed this statement. The portraits of former headmasters had abandoned all pretense of sleep, watching the confrontation with undisguised interest. Perhaps, Dumbledore finally said, I have underestimated your maturity, Harry. However, there are certain matters that remain beyond your current need to know. I ask that you trust that my actions, however questionable they may appear, serve a greater purpose. Trust is earned through honesty, not secrecy. Harry replied quietly. Whatever your greater purpose, using my own money to buy me pre-approved friends doesn't inspire confidence in your methods. Mrs. Weasley made a distressed sound. Harry, we never thought of it as buying friendship. We genuinely care about you. I believe you mean that now, Mrs. Weasley, Harry said gently. But our relationship began with deception. I need to figure out what's real and what was manufactured. Ron finally spoke up, his voice strained. Does this mean we're not friends anymore? Harry turned to him, seeing vulnerability beneath the sullen exterior. I don't know, Ron. I'd like to think we could build a real friendship, one based on who we actually are rather than who we were paid to be. But that has to be your choice, made freely, with no financial incentive attached. I don't care about the money, Ron insisted. I never did. Then you shouldn't object to the new arrangement, Harry pointed out. Your family still receives educational support, but without the obligation to include me in your lives. Ron nodded slowly. Yeah. All right. Dumbledore sighed heavily. I see you have given this considerable thought, Harry. While I maintain that my original arrangements were made with your best interests in mind, I recognize that continuing them against your expressed wishes would be counterproductive. He took a quill from his desk, dipped it in ink, and signed the new agreement with a flourish. I hope, in time, you will come to understand my motivations more fully. I hope so too, sir, Harry replied honestly. Because right now, they make very little sense to me. Professor McGonagall added her signature next, followed by Cragrock, who provided a specially enchanted blood quill for Harry's signature. Standard for Goblin contracts involving minors, he explained as Harry signed his name, the ink briefly flashing gold before settling into the parchment. The Weasleys looked at each other uncertainly. What does this mean for Harry visiting during holidays? Mrs. Weasley asked. He can't stay at that horrible Muggle house all summer. Harry is welcome to visit any family he chooses, Dumbledore said carefully, provided certain protective measures are maintained. Harry appreciated the woman's concern despite everything. Thank you for thinking of that, Mrs. Weasley. I'd like to consider any invitations as they come, without predetermined obligations on either side. Of course, dear, she replied, though she looked crestfallen. Our door is always open to you. As the meeting concluded, Cragrock requested a private word with Harry. They stepped into an antechamber off the main office, where the Goblin cast a quick privacy charm. You handled that admirably, Mr. Potter, Cragrock said, a hint of pride in his gravelly voice. Few wizards twice your age would have maintained such composure. I had an excellent teacher, Harry replied with a small smile. Thank you for coming so quickly. Gringotts prides itself on responsive service to valued clients. The standard phrase had become something of a private joke between them. Cragrock's way of acknowledging their relationship went beyond business without explicitly admitting to personal attachment. This new arrangement gives you significantly more autonomy. The Goblin continued. Professor McGonagall seems a reasonable choice for oversight, strict but fair, and importantly, not blindly loyal to Dumbledore. Harry nodded. I thought so too. Will the Weasleys really still receive educational support? Yes, though restructured as merit-based scholarships rather than contracted payments. The twins actually qualify for academic achievement in Charms and Transfiguration, despite their reputation for mischief. Percy for overall excellence. Ronald. Cragrock hesitated. Has room for improvement? Harry suggested diplomatically. Indeed. However, I took the liberty of including a chess mastery category that should cover his needs adequately. Harry grinned. Clever. Whatever else is artificial, his chess skills are genuine. Cragrock's expression grew serious. This resolves the immediate financial impropriety, but Dumbledore's reluctance to explain his broader motivations remains concerning. The man clearly has plans within plans. I know, Harry sighed. But confronting one manipulation at a time seems prudent. We've established I won't be a passive participant in whatever game he's playing. A significant victory, Cragrock agreed. Our regular meetings should continue, particularly as you explore these factors beyond financial considerations Dumbledore alluded to. Harry nodded. I'll use the journal to keep you updated on any developments. They rejoined the others, who were preparing to depart. The atmosphere remained tense but less overtly hostile. As Harry thanked Cragrock formally for his assistance, he noticed Dumbledore watching their interaction with thoughtful calculation. An unusual friendship you've developed with your account manager, Harry, the headmaster observed as the Goblin departed. Goblins rarely invest such personal attention in wizard clients. Cragrock recognizes the value of treating people as individuals rather than assets to be managed, Harry replied pointedly. Something I've come to appreciate greatly. Dumbledore's eyes narrowed slightly before his benevolent smile returned. Indeed. A valuable lesson for us all, perhaps. The Weasley parents prepared to depart, Mrs. Weasley hovering uncertainly before Harry. May I? She asked, arms partially extended for a hug. Harry hesitated, then nodded. Whatever his feelings about the deception, he couldn't deny her apparent genuine affection. Her embrace was warm and maternal, something he had little experience with. We do care about you, Harry, she whispered. That was never fake. Thank you, he replied, not quite accepting her assertion but acknowledging her sincerity in this moment. As they left, Ron lingered behind. So, what happens now? With us, I mean. Harry considered the question. Now we figure out if we actually like each other when no one's being paid to make it work. I already know I like you, Ron muttered. Famous or not, rich or not. You're decent. Then prove it, Harry challenged. Spend time with me because you want to, not because your parents expect it. Let me make other friends without getting jealous. Be Ron Weasley, not my designated best mate. Ron nodded slowly. I can try. It's just been drilled into me for so long, you know? Harry Potter this, Harry Potter that. Be nice to Harry, help Harry, watch over Harry. That must have been weird, Harry acknowledged. Like being assigned a job you never applied for. Sort of, yeah? Ron looked relieved at Harry's understanding. But I do want to be friends. Real ones? Then let's start over. Harry extended his hand. I'm Harry. Just Harry. Ron smiled tentatively, shaking the offered hand. Ron Weasley. Chess master, Quidditch enthusiast, terrible at potions. Nice to meet you, Ron. Want to go find Hermione? I promised her an explanation, and she's probably bursting with questions by now. Mental, that one, Ron said automatically, then caught himself. But brilliant, I suppose? Yeah, let's go find her. As they headed back toward Gryffindor Tower, Harry reflected on the morning's confrontation. One manipulation addressed, countless others likely waiting to be discovered. But he had allies now, Cragrock's steady guidance, McGonagall's principled oversight, perhaps even genuine friendships forming with his peers. Whatever Dumbledore's greater purpose, Harry would no longer be a passive piece on his chessboard. News travels with magical speed at Hogwarts. By dinner that evening, everyone seemed to know some version of what had happened, though the stories ranged from mostly accurate to wildly embellished. Is it true Dumbledore signed a marriage contract between you and Ginny Weasley? Lavender Brown asked breathlessly as Harry entered the common room. Did the Weasleys really get paid 1,000 galleons a month to be your friend? Seamus wanted to know. I heard you brought a whole team of goblin lawyers to confront the headmaster, a second year exclaimed. Harry weathered the questions with as much patience as he could muster, giving minimal responses while making his way to where Hermione had secured a relatively quiet corner. She had spent the afternoon in the library after Harry and Ron explained the situation, researching magical guardianship laws with characteristic thoroughness. The legal precedent is actually quite clear, she informed him, spreading parchment notes across the table. The 1786 Act Cragrock cited definitely supports your right to review financial decisions, but there's more. Under the 1892 Wizarding Orphans Financial Protection Amendment, you could potentially petition for a review of all financial arrangements made on your behalf since your parents' deaths. Harry smiled at her enthusiasm. That's brilliant, Hermione. Cragrock mentioned something similar, but I wasn't sure about the specifics. I made copies of the relevant statutes, she continued, pushing several pages toward him. The process requires presenting evidence of potential mismanagement to the Wisengamot, though. Which Dumbledore heads, Harry noted wryly. Bit of a conflict of interest. Yes, he'd have to recuse himself, but still, the political complications would be substantial. Hermione bit her lip thoughtfully. Your account manager seems remarkably helpful. Goblins don't usually get so involved in wizard affairs. Cragrock is unique, Harry said carefully. He's been managing the Potter accounts for decades and takes his responsibilities seriously. Well, I think it's wonderful you have someone so knowledgeable helping you, Hermione declared. Especially with Dumbledore being so manipulative. Harry studied his bushy-haired classmate with newfound appreciation. Unlike most of their peers, she showed no discomfort criticizing the revered headmaster. You don't seem surprised by Dumbledore's actions, he observed. Hermione shrugged. Authority figures aren't infallible. My parents taught me that. They're dentists, and they always say the medical community can be just as prone to mistakes and ego as any other profession. Why should wizards be different? That's refreshingly logical, Harry said. Most people here treat Dumbledore like he's infallible. Well, he's clearly brilliant, Hermione acknowledged. But using your money to buy you friends is objectively wrong, no matter how he justifies it. Their conversation was interrupted by Fred and George Weasley, who approached with uncharacteristically serious expressions. Got a moment, Harry? Fred asked. Private conversation needed, George added. Curious, Harry followed them to a secluded window alcove, where they cast a quick privacy charm. We've been thinking about this whole payment situation, Fred began. And we don't like it one bit, George continued. Not just because it's unfair to you, though it absolutely is, but because it casts doubt on our entire family. We want you to know the shop invitation stands, Fred said firmly. Harry blinked. Shop invitation? To visit Weasley's Wizard Wheezes when we open it, George explained. Our joke shop. It's just a dream now, but someday. And we never ask for investment or anything, Fred added quickly. That's not what this is about. We just want to be clear that our friendship, or potential friendship, isn't tied to family obligations or payments or any of that rubbish, George concluded. Harry felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. I appreciate that. Really. Also, Fred lowered his voice further. We've sent a rather pointed letter to Bill and Charlie, our oldest brothers. They'd want to know about this arrangement, George explained. Bill especially. He works for Gringotts as a curse breaker. He'd be furious about financial manipulation. Bill might have useful insights. Harry agreed. Though I hope it doesn't cause problems within your family. Our family created the problem, Fred said bluntly. Sorting it out honestly is the only way forward. Harry nodded, grateful for their straightforward approach. As the twins departed, he rejoined Hermione, who had been joined by Neville Longbottom. All right, Harry? Neville asked tentatively. Everyone's talking about what happened. I'm managing, Harry replied. Just trying to figure out who my real friends are versus who's been assigned to me. Neville nodded thoughtfully. My Gran always says you can tell a person's character by how they treat those who can't benefit them. Might be a good measure now that everyone knows you're not handing out allowances. Harry laughed despite himself. That's surprisingly insightful, Neville. Gran has her moments, Neville said with a small smile. For what it's worth, I think you handled it well. Standing up to Dumbledore takes real courage. The three of them spent the evening comparing notes from herbology, deliberately avoiding further discussion of the morning's drama. Harry found Neville's quiet companionship and Hermione's intellectual engagement a welcome respite from the day's emotional turmoil. As he prepared for bed that night, Harry reflected on how quickly his Hogwarts experience had transformed. Just 24 hours ago, he'd been navigating relationships built on hidden contracts and obligations. Now everything lay exposed, uncomfortable but honest. Ron entered the dormitory last, hovering uncertainly by Harry's bed. I wrote to Ginny, he said abruptly. Told her about the contract. Figured she deserved to know people were planning her future without asking. Harry raised his eyebrows, surprised by this initiative. That couldn't have been easy. She's my sister, Ron said simply. Contract or not. Thank you, Harry replied. That was the right thing to do. A fragile understanding passed between them, not quite friendship restored, but perhaps something more authentic beginning to take shape. The following weeks brought subtle but significant changes to Harry's Hogwarts experience. The initial shock and gossip gradually subsided, replaced by a new dynamic as people reassessed their approach to the boy who lived. Some, like Draco Malfoy, seemed smugly vindicated. Told you some wizarding families are better than others, Potter, he commented during potions. At least Slytherins are honest about their ambitions. Others, particularly those from less affluent families, regarded Harry with newfound wariness, as if concerned he might suspect their every friendly gesture was financially motivated. I don't think you're trying to get my gold, Hannah, Harry had to assure a flustered Hufflepuff who'd apologized profusely for asking to borrow a quill. His relationship with Ron remained complicated, less clingy than before, with occasional awkward silences, but gradually evolving towards something that felt more genuine. They still played chess, Ron still won handily, and discussed Quidditch, but with Ron making visible efforts to respect Harry's autonomy. Meanwhile, Harry found himself developing unexpected connections. Neville's unassuming loyalty and botanical knowledge made him a valuable study partner. Hermione's intellectual curiosity and fearless questioning of authority aligned well with Harry's goblin-influenced perspective. Even quiet Susan Bones from Hufflepuff, whose aunt headed the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, became a regular conversation partner during shared classes. Most significantly, Harry maintained regular correspondence with Cragrock, documenting his observations and receiving the Goblin's strategic advice in return. Their secure journal communications evolved to include not just financial matters but broader discussions of wizarding politics and Harry's growing network of authentic relationships. The Longbottom heir presents interesting alliance possibilities, Cragrock wrote in early November. His family holds significant Wizengamot influence, and your shared circumstances as orphans of Voldemort's campaign creates natural common ground. Harry had never considered Neville from such a strategic perspective, but he recognized the wisdom in Cragrock's assessment. Not that he would befriend Neville for political advantage, the very manipulation he resented in Dumbledore, but understanding the broader implications of their natural connection seemed prudent. Halloween brought the Mountain Troll incident, cementing Harry's friendship with Hermione in the crucible of shared danger. Ron had accompanied him to warn her, a genuine act of concern that did more to repair their relationship than weeks of careful conversation. "You came looking for me," Hermione said wonderingly after the professors had awarded points and dismissed them to their dormitory. "Both of you. You could have just told the prefect. That wouldn't have been very Gryffindor," Harry replied with a tired smile. "Or very friendly," Ron added quietly. Something shifted between the three of them that night, a triangular relationship forming where each connection stood on its own merits rather than through obligation or arrangement. Harry found himself genuinely enjoying Ron's humor and loyalty when freely given, Hermione's brilliance and compassion, and the balance they created together. November brought Harry's first Quidditch match, and with it, the first obvious attempt on his life as his broom was jinxed mid-game. Hermione's quick thinking in setting fire to Snape's robes, though they later questioned whether he was the actual culprit, saved Harry from a potentially fatal fall. "Someone tried to kill me," Harry told Cragrock through their journal that evening. "This goes beyond Dumbledore's social manipulations." "Indeed," came the Goblin's immediate response. "This suggests the factors beyond financial considerations Dumbledore alluded to may involve active threats to your safety." Perhaps his arrangement with the Weasleys contained protective elements alongside the problematic social engineering. This perspective gave Harry pause. Had he been too quick to condemn Dumbledore's methods without understanding the dangers they addressed? He resolved to approach the headmaster for a more candid conversation, after consulting with Cragrock about the right strategy. Before he could arrange this, however, Christmas approached, bringing decision about holiday plans. The Weasleys had extended a tentative invitation, which Harry politely declined, explaining he felt it best to give everyone space while they recalibrated their relationship. Instead, he arranged to stay at Hogwarts, using the relative quiet to explore the castle and continue his research. It was during this peaceful exploration that Harry discovered the Mirror of Erised, with its heartbreaking vision of his parents and extended family. When Dumbledore found him on his third visit to the mirror, their conversation took an unexpected turn. "It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live, Harry," the headmaster said gently, finding Harry once again transfixed before the mirror's surface. "They look happy," Harry whispered, unable to tear his gaze from his parents' smiling faces. "Like they're proud of me." "They would be," Dumbledore assured him. "You have shown remarkable resilience and maturity, particularly in recent months." Harry finally turned from the mirror. "You mean with the Weasley contract?" "Among other things." Dumbledore studied him with those penetrating blue eyes. "I owe you an apology, Harry. While I maintain that ensuring you had proper wizarding connections was necessary, I see now that the method was heavy-handed." Why not just tell me? Harry asked, the question that had bothered him for weeks. Why all the secrecy and manipulation? Dumbledore sighed heavily. An old man's mistake, perhaps. I have spent decades making difficult decisions, balancing greater goods against individual autonomy. One develops habits of control and calculation. That doesn't really answer my question, Professor. No, I suppose it doesn't. Dumbledore conjured two comfortable armchairs facing away from the mirror. Perhaps a more honest conversation is overdue. Please sit. Harry took the offered seat, curiosity overcoming his lingering resentment. You have formed an unusual bond with your Goblin account manager, Dumbledore observed, his tone carefully neutral. One that predates your Hogwarts letter, I believe? Harry tensed. Cragrock has been very helpful in understanding my inheritance. Indeed. More helpful than most goblin bankers typically are with wizard children. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. I wonder when exactly you first met Mr. Cragrock? Realizing concealment was pointless, Harry answered honestly. When I was 4. I got separated from the Dursleys in London and wandered into the Leaky Cauldron. Cragrock was there and recognized me. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. Most unexpected. And this relationship continued secretly for 7 years? He helped me understand who I was when no one else would, Harry said defensively. He taught me about my parents, my heritage, the wizarding world, everything the Dursleys tried to keep from me. I see. Dumbledore steepled his fingers. And it was Cragrock who discovered the financial arrangements with the Weasley family? He's my account manager. Reviewing unusual transactions is his job. Of course. Dumbledore smiled slightly. Though I suspect his interest in your welfare extends beyond professional obligation. Harry remained silent, unwilling to expose more about his relationship with Cragrock than necessary. I am not criticizing, Harry. Dumbledore continued. Merely observing that you found guidance I failed to provide. The question becomes whether that guidance has prepared you for the challenges ahead. What challenges? Harry asked sharply. Dumbledore studied him for a long moment. I believe you have already encountered one, during your Quidditch match. Someone at Hogwarts wishes you harm, though perhaps not the someone you suspect. Not Snape, then? Professor Snape. Dumbledore corrected gently. Was attempting a counter-curse, not a jinx. His personal feelings toward you are complicated by history with your father, but he does not seek your harm. Then who? That is a matter still under investigation. Dumbledore's expression grew grave. But it relates to why I arranged for trusted wizarding families to take particular interest in you. The danger that claimed your parents has not entirely passed, Harry. There are those who would seek to harm you out of vengeance or darker purposes. Voldemort's followers, Harry surmised. And perhaps Voldemort himself, in some form. Dumbledore watched Harry carefully as he delivered this bombshell. Harry controlled his reaction, years of Cragrock's coaching and negotiation helping him maintain composure. You believe he's still alive somehow? Not alive as we understand it, but not truly gone either. Dumbledore sighed. This is part of what I meant by factors beyond financial considerations. Your safety, indeed your very life, remains at risk from forces most children never face. So the contract with the Weasleys was partly for protection? Harry asked, recalling Cragrock's speculation. Among other purposes, yes. Arthur Weasley, while not an Auror, has significant ministry connections. Their home has substantial magical protections. Their loyalty to the light during the war was unwavering. Dumbledore's tone turned reflective. Perhaps I should have explained these aspects rather than relying on contractual obligations and financial incentives. It would have made a difference in how I perceived it, Harry acknowledged. Though I still believe using my own money without my knowledge was wrong. A fair criticism. Dumbledore conceded. I have become accustomed to making unilateral decisions for what I perceive as the greater good. Your independence and the resources Cragrock has provided have disrupted my assumptions. Good, Harry said simply. Unexpectedly, Dumbledore chuckled. Indeed. Perhaps it is good. An old man can become too certain of his own wisdom. He rose from his chair. The mirror will be moved tomorrow, Harry. I ask that you not seek it out again. But perhaps we might continue these more honest conversations in the future? I'd like that, Harry said, realizing he meant it despite his lingering wariness. Understanding Dumbledore's perspective, even if he disagreed with his methods, seemed valuable. As they parted ways at the staircase leading to Gryffindor Tower, Dumbledore added, "Your goblin friend has served you well in many respects, Harry. But remember that goblins and wizards have different values and perspectives. Both have wisdom to offer, but neither possesses the complete truth." "Cragrock says something similar about wizards," Harry replied with a small smile. "He thinks most of you are arrogant and short-sighted, but he admits some have insight goblins lack." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "A remarkably balanced view for a goblin. Perhaps there is hope for interspecies understanding after all." That night, Harry recorded the conversation in detail for Cragrock, including Dumbledore's oblique warning about goblin perspectives and his claims about Voldemort's continued existence. "Interesting developments," Cragrock wrote back. "Dumbledore's acknowledgement of error, however limited, represents a significant shift. His suggestion that the Dark Lord persists requires serious consideration, as it contextualizes many otherwise puzzling decisions. Regarding his comments about goblin perspectives, he is not entirely wrong. My people view wealth, honor, and contracts differently than wizards. What I have not told him, however, is how much my perspective has been influenced by 7 years of teaching a most unusual wizard child." Harry smiled at this rare acknowledgement of their mutual influence. Cragrock continued, moving forward, "Cautious engagement with Dumbledore seems advisable. Verify his claims independently when possible, but recognize that his knowledge of dark magical threats likely exceeds mine. Maintain your network of genuine friendships as both emotional support and practical alliance building. Most importantly, remember that true value lies not in vaults or contracts, but in connections formed through authentic choice and mutual respect. This principle applies equally to goblin banking and human friendship, a fact both Dumbledore and my fellow goblins might benefit from recognizing." The wisdom in these words resonated deeply with Harry. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whether Voldemort's potential return, Dumbledore's complex schemes, or the ordinary trials of growing up, he would face them with clear eyes and genuine allies. His unusual childhood, split between Dursley neglect and goblin mentorship, had given him a unique perspective on both magical and human nature. He understood ledgers and loyalty, contracts and courage, in ways few wizards ever would. The boy who lived had become something unexpected, not just a celebrity or a chess piece in Dumbledore's grand strategy, but a young wizard who recognized that relationships, like galleons, must be earned honestly to hold true value. As the school year progressed, Harry continued building authentic connections while navigating the complex web of wizarding politics Cragrock had taught him to recognize. When the mystery of Nicholas Flamel and the Philosopher's Stone finally led him, Ron, and Hermione through the third-floor corridor's challenges, Harry faced Professor Quirrell and the parasitic remnant of Voldemort with both Gryffindor courage and goblin cunning. "You see what I have become?" the face on the back of Quirrell's head hissed. "Mere shadow and vapor, forced to share another's body. But there have always been those willing to let me into their hearts and minds. There will always be those who seek power at any cost," Harry replied, thinking of Cragrock's lessons on desperation deals and toxic investments. "But there are more who understand that some prices are too high to pay." The confrontation ended as prophesied, Voldemort unable to touch Harry due to his mother's sacrificial protection, Quirrell crumbling beneath Harry's hands, the stones secured. When Harry awoke in the hospital wing to find Dumbledore at his bedside, their conversation held new dimensions of mutual respect, if not complete trust. "He's going to come back, isn't he?" Harry asked after Dumbledore explained about the stone's destruction. "I fear so, Harry. But you have already proven yourself equal to significant challenges." The headmaster's eyes held a thoughtful gleam. "Your approach tonight was most interesting, courage balanced with calculation. Not unlike combining the best aspects of goblin and wizard perspectives." Harry smiled faintly. Value exists in unexpected places if you know how to recognize it. Indeed. Dumbledore studied him curiously. A lesson I continue to learn myself. At the end of your feast, as Gryffindor celebrated winning the House Cup, Harry found himself surrounded by friendships formed through choice rather than contract. Ron, finally comfortable in a relationship based on genuine connection rather than obligation. Hermione, whose brilliant mind and loyal heart had proven invaluable. Neville, whose quiet courage had earned the points that secured their victory. Even his understanding with Dumbledore had evolved into something more honest, not blind trust, but recognition of shared goals approached through different methods. As the Hogwarts Express carried them back to London, Harry reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in a single school year. The contracts had been rewritten, literally and figuratively. The ledgers balanced with truth rather than manipulation. Cragrock waited on platform 9 3/4, a peculiar sight among the wizard parents, the only goblin present, standing with dignified composure despite curious stares. Harry approached him with a broad smile. "Unusual to see you outside, Gringotts," he commented. "Special circumstances warrant exceptional measures," Cragrock replied, his formal tone belied by the warmth in his dark eyes. "I believe we have substantial matters to discuss before you return to your Muggle residence." Uncle Vernon, waiting impatiently beyond the barrier, would indeed be surprised by Harry's goblin escort. The summer ahead would bring new challenges and preparations, but Harry faced them with confidence born from his unique education in both magical finance and human connection. The boy who lived had discovered the true value of friendship, mentorship, and independence, lessons that would serve him well in the trials to come. And if those trials involved facing Voldemort again, navigating Dumbledore's complex strategies, or simply growing into his own power, he would do so with clear understanding of what truly mattered. After all, as Cragrock had taught him long ago in that first meeting at the Leaky Cauldron, value, Mr. Potter, is not what others tell you something is worth. Value is what you determine it to be, based on what truly matters to you. For Harry Potter, what truly mattered had become clear: genuine connections, honest dealings, and the freedom to choose his own path forward. Goblin wisdom and Gryffindor courage combined into something uniquely his own. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.